here. He's here.
Huh?
He's here.
He's here. Yeah. Who's here?
He's getting all of us.
Yes.
There's one verse in the Quran that really grabbed my attention. You know, even though people send me verses every once in a while, and this was sent by a Dr. Ermark, and I think he's in Egypt.
Right.
Okay, I was dealing with him for a while. It's chapter 114 of the Quran.
Yes, yes.
And it says, "In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful,
Yeah.
say, I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind, the King of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the sneaky whisperer, who whispers into the hearts of people from among the Jinn and among the people."
Right.
I mean, that hit right on. I mean, that was like a direct hit.
Yeah.
Because that's what they do. They whisper into your mind. They whisper into your ear. They tell you all this garbage that's false. That's one of the things that they get very angry over. Is when I would tell a patient that they were parasites and that they were sucking their life energy, they would get furious. They did not like them knowing that at all.
Yeah.
So if the patient was going to go off, they would go off with that piece of information.
Right. So before we looked at your work, most of us were already familiar with the fact that we're being faced with huge attacks from both big tech and big pharma. We recognize this. I think many of us recognize this in this great awakening, if that's what we want to call it, for now, for lack of a better term. But what I'm seeing is that it seems to be mirrored. These parasites, as you mentioned, like vampires sucking out energy, which are the jinn, which are the demons, which are the invisible and negative entities. Their behavior, this parasitical behavior, sucking out energy, mirrors what big tech is also doing. It's like bullies. This big tech is bullying us with the technology that we are stuck with. They're bullying our attention. They're bullying our minds and sucking our energy. In a similar way to how even the big pharma is doing. They're bullying us into taking their poisons, and sucking our energy. It's like these parasites seems to be mirrored from these entities to big tech to big pharma. It's sorcery and witchcraft throughout all of these.
It sounds like something that the demons would love.
Yeah,
exactly. And I just wanted to say something about the light, because I know you mentioned light and how you observe that after sunset it gets worse, the voices, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so I was thinking, okay, what is happening in nature that does that? So, as the sun goes down, the voices get worse, but as soon as day breaks, right, it breaks all of that. So we have a chapter in the Quran, which is 113. It says, "In the name of God, the Passionate, the Most Merciful, I seek refuge of the Lord of the daybreak." And then the second verse, "From the evil which He created." So it's like the evil that He created, it gets broken by that first initial light that happens in nature. Like, so this is a phenomenon that's happening in nature. And Brother Wes, if you can go to Surah Al-Asr 103, it is very interesting because daybreak is kind of just before daybreak. There's the first prayer. Second prayer is when the sun is just past the zenith. And now, as the sun is now coming down to the next prayer, it says here in Wal Asr, and that prayer is called Asr. It says Wal Asr. So by that time in nature, when the sun is now declining, human beings are in loss. Now, why? Because now that time is coming where light is now being taken away from our atmosphere, and the only way for us to get salvation is for those who believe and who do good work and recommend the truth and remember that to recommend patience. So be patient till daybreak is when that light will emerge again. So I thought that was very interesting that the light in nature has a direct connection to these voices.
I think that do good work is it's critical, because you can have all the faith you want in the world, and if you don't do good work, if you don't do good stuff, what good is that faith?
In the Quran, the spouse is the garment for the other spouse. Like they are supposed to be connected in such a way that they are like each other's clothing, which is an analogy of the power from that relationship. And I think that the separation of this form of these two spouses, that really shows like how sinister and how devious this it's like a military force on a cosmic level, on a personal level. Yeah, that's the verse right there, actually. This is something that, concerns us being children of Adam. We're the first, ancestors, the first man and the first woman had exactly the same type of, interaction at that level as a husband and a wife.
Yep.
With the very first, given the designation devil that we know of. Yeah, that's the verse right there. That he will command mankind to, like whether it's hormonally or through the food, through surgeries and things like that. This is such a prominent part of the modern world. Where do we get these ideas? How does this even come to someone's mind that they're not satisfied with their appearance, the way they're created, that they have to alter for some either vain reason or some kind of a fear or belief, so some kind of a misunderstanding of what they are naturally.
What I wanted to do was ask you guys a question that I don't really understand. I don't know a lot about Muslim, but what's with this? We're both, Christians and Muslims have the same God.
Oh, we can answer. Yes, please answer.
Why are they always at each other's throats? Why is this the jihad stuff? And then the Christians are like, oh yeah, the Muslims are evil. What is going on? I don't understand it.
Thank you
for two people that have the same God, that worship the same God. Yes, what is going on?
Okay, so we're going to be here for much longer. We're going to be here for much longer.
Yeah, this is very interesting.
But before I introduce Jerry to the viewers, I'd like to read the warning notice that is on his website.
A warning notice?
Yes, a warning notice. Yes.
I don't remember that. You have to read it to me.
Okay, so the warning notice goes, the voices will try to prevent you from reading and digesting our helpful material.
Oh, okay.
And I think I personally experienced this myself. Okay, so, and one thing that stood out was one of the comments that you used from a viewer who actually experienced this. He said, they won't let me listen to any information about what they are or how to get rid of them. When I tried to listen to these interviews, I fell asleep. Later, when I tried to remember what was said, all I could remember was that there was nothing useful in them and the deception was complete. It's clearly that this is a threat to the survival of these voices. So viewers might experience some kind of sleepiness, some kind of distraction may occur. And yet ultimately understanding that this is the very last thing that the voices want their victims to become aware of. I'm personally extremely grateful for coming across Jerry's work. Who is Jerry, you might ask? Okay, so Jerry is a retired licensed psychotherapist with over 40 years of experience working with and studying. Yes, so that's both, working with and studying the thought processes of psychotic and criminally insane patients in some of the most volatile psychiatric institutions in the nation. Jerry is a commercial pilot, certified scuba diver, and long-distance motorcyclist. He has held the positions of second lieutenant in the Arizona Civil Air Patrol and assistant scout master. He was awarded the state of Arizona's Meritorious Service Award and the Pima College Apple Award of Teaching Abnormal Psychology. His formal academic training comprises a BA in psychology from Temple University, a master's degree in counseling from the University of Georgia, and 2 years of study in a PhD psychology program. So clearly, very qualified. He is the co-author of An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower, and is currently has a private practice in Arizona. So what I can see, Jerry, is that you've graduated, you've taught, you've researched, you've been in the clinical field, you've written a book, you're a mace practitioner, which I'm sure you're going to go into later on. And I'll put everything in the description box for the viewers later. But yeah, so this is a little introduction to who Jerry is. So lastly, before I hand the mic over to Jerry, I'd like to quote C.S. Lewis from your website again in the Screwtape Letters. He says, so Screwtape says, there are two equal and opposite errors to which our race can fall about the devils. One is to disbelieve in their existence, and the other is to believe, and to feel an excessive and unhealthy interest in them. They themselves are equally pleased by both. Yeah, so there seems to be the they're happy for those who don't believe in the devil and those who are excessively believing in the devil. So we are all about seeking the middle path. So having said all of that, Jerry, welcome, Jerry, to the Muslim and non-Muslim viewers on Endgame Islam. Help us find the right balance in this satanic age of scientism and pharmakia.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want me to just kind of start off with how it all began, or?
Yes, please. There's going to be definitely viewers who are not aware of your story. Yep.
Okay. Well, you just, burst in and ask whatever questions you want.
Yeah, sure.
In the meantime, one thing that I have noticed is that the Muslims pay a whole lot more attention, serious attention to the existence of these demons than Christians do.
Yeah.
The Christians kind of, oh yeah, they exist, and they throw them into the back seat and go, yeah, we know they're around, but they don't take them seriously.
Yeah.
It's almost like, oh yeah, now with science today and all our modern technology and all the stuff we have today, demons are like passe. I mean, they're just not around anymore. And they don't really take them seriously, and they don't spend a lot of attention on them. And what they do is they come around and they bite them in the back, without even knowing. So the greatest accomplishment the devil ever made was that the devil doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That's very dangerous. After almost 45 years, I've studied these voices extensively, and they run a list of recurring, persistent, consistent patterns. Okay? And these patterns happened at the huge state hospital where I worked. They happened in the mental health centers. They happened in the private psych hospitals where I worked. They happened when I was working in the psychology department of state prison. And now that I'm dealing with clients all over the world, these same patterns exist with the voices there.
Yeah.
Now, bottom line is the psychiatric mafia is telling the Western world, the entire planet, that these voices are hallucinations. That's doing everybody a grave injustice. If they're running set, repeatable, specific patterns, they can't be hallucinations. Hallucinations are random. They're all over the place. You can't predict them. You can clearly predict what these things are going to say. And you can. They're on my website, jerrymarzinsky.com, under articles.
Right.
There's a whole list of 23 repeatable, specific patterns that these voices run.
Yeah, we've been studying these patterns, and I just want to say that you mentioned that the Muslims take the devil seriously, and or the demons, because it's mentioned throughout the whole Quran that he is our clear avowed enemy, and the Jinn are mentioned throughout the Quran. You're right. The Muslims take it more seriously, but what I've seen is that we have also been victims of the scientism that has come through, and it seems to have overridden anyone's belief about these demons actually being what they are.
Well, that's in both cases. That's with the Christians too.
Yeah.
But you guys have specific prayers against them.
Yeah.
I don't know of any specific prayers against the jinn or the demon that the Christians have. I've never seen one.
Mm-hmm.
They have the general prayers. Now the demons absolutely hate the 23rd Psalm. Yeah. I've had patients tell me that they react like worms thrown on a hot frying pan when the 23rd Psalm is repeated. You know,
Yeah.
I know you guys have specific prayers against them. I have a listing
Mm.
of some of them here with me.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. The scientism has hit both Christians and Muslims.
Yeah.
Jesus was reported in the Bible to cast out demons 23 different times.
Yes. Yes.
And yet the Christians are going, oh, well, that's just, an old fairy tale. I mean, there's really no demons around. That was 2,000 years ago or something like that. It's, it doesn't bother us today.
Mhm.
No. If you get that list of patterns that I found exist, they're the same patterns that the mainstream media is spitting out at us right now.
Yes. Yes.
It's coming over the mainstream media.
Yeah.
So, I'm just going to read a few of them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sorry, before you do, Jerry, before you do, just on those patterns, Brother Sadi, you wanted to say something. Yeah. If you can, very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Jerry, I just wanted to say that when they ascribe hallucinations to these whispers, or as we say in Islam, waswasa, or frequent intrusive thoughts, it's very tied into chaos as a principle. They attribute everything they don't understand to chaos. They interpret human life to the Big Bang theory, the theory of evolution. Everything has an origin that is placed within chaos, and they don't know. And just by them saying it's hallucinations, because it's like these thoughts have a clear agenda. They are always trying to steer you away from God. So if they have an agenda, how can they be something that is chaotic? It seems they have a purpose. They have an agenda.
Well, they do have an agenda, and that agenda is not chaotic. They go about it in a very predictable way.
Absolutely.
They're always after the destruction of the individual, and they can put thoughts into the human's thought stream. What we're taught from the time we're born is that all thoughts that you hear belong to you. That's a massive fallacy.
Yep.
Matter of fact, virtually none of your thoughts belong to you.
Mm.
Now we all have a thought stream where you have this voice rambling in your head all the time. It's telling you stuff you already know. It's telling you bad stuff about yourself. It's telling you judgmental stuff about everybody else. It just goes on and on and on, and it never stops. Okay? If that's who you really are, then who is it that's listening to that voice? You're the one listening to it. You are not it.
I woke up to this about a month ago. Things have changed for me drastically. I'm spotting them. I'm recognizing how things are different, and where the negative effects are, where the weight, the feeling of heaviness, all of I can recognize things that I would have been oblivious to in the past, thinking, as you said, as we're taught, that it's us. Now that you mentioned this, I've been speaking about this endlessly, and this, I'm sure you recognize this new age positive movement that's out there, trying to train everyone into positive thinking. What I see is, for example, and I'm not criticizing Joe Dispenza, but I see him as one of the leaders in getting people to train themselves out of negativity and into positivity. But the problem is, as you've rightly said, that you're still believing that these thoughts are your own thoughts. Yeah. So when you're doing that, as you said, that means that there's something wrong with you. So no matter how much you're trying to train yourself into positive thinking, it's like as if you're trying to do something shackled, because you're accepting that, you're weak, you're the one with the problem, because it's still your own thought. But the second, as you said, you separate this, that's it. There's a weight lifted, there's a freedom. Now you're stronger, and now you can actually make progress. I completely agree. So this is why we're doing this today. Yeah.
I've had some, one schizophrenic wrote me and said, now that I know that the voices aren't me, I can handle this.
Yes. Yep.
And that's the same way with, they hit all of us. It's not just schizophrenics. They hit schizophrenics worse than they do everybody else, but they hit us all.
Right.
They will put they have complete access to your lower mind. You know, they can pull up every rotten thing that you've ever done,
Right.
and rub it in your face. You know, if they'll go, why did you say that, or why did you do this thing, or who did you offend? I mean, it just goes round and round and round. Those are not your thoughts. And Sherry Sweeney, my co-author in the book we wrote, she said that every negative thought you have about yourself or anybody else comes from the dark side. It doesn't belong to you.
Yep. You said it's like the brain is like a radio receiver receiving signals, yeah?
Right.
Yeah.
And where you tune that tuner to is the signals you're going to pick up. Now with schizophrenics, it's like that receiver is jammed on the negative frequency, a very low frequency. And if they try to force it into a positive frequency, like you were saying, it just gets turned back. You know, it's like some rubber band is tied to it, and you force it, and then it just snaps back to where it was. And on top of that, you have negative programming that everybody is subject to. You know, because you're born into a world where the program is already there. You're born into it.
Well, I mean, on that, if I can, just to give viewers another example, and maybe you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this. You gave the example of like a radio receiver, and I was thinking, so you're saying that these thoughts, they're not you. Although they're inside you, they're not you. So I was thinking a bit like my email account or my WhatsApp account. I get all kinds of information in there, but it doesn't mean that is me.
Right.
You know? So I'm getting news, I'm getting all kinds of news. It could be good news, it could be negative news, right? Or there could be even filth that's being sent to me. But just because it's on my WhatsApp account or on my email account, it doesn't mean it's me. So that's like a similar example. That's how the brain is. We're being sent all kinds of information. So just because it's in there, it doesn't mean it's you.
Yeah. And you don't have to listen to it. That's your choice.
Right.
You know, you do not have to attend to it.
Yeah.
So where you put your attention, your energy goes with it.
Yeah.
So if you're putting your attention on negative stuff, your energy's flowing into negative stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And there's
another thing. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Another thing, Dr. Jerry, when you said that the brain is like a receiver, I think that these disorders like schizophrenia, as well as other physiological diseases such as cancer, have been running rampant due to industrialization. Because I think before industrialization, human beings would have been much more involved with nature, which is the original pharmacy that God intended for us. But after industrialization, we're much more divorced from nature. Yeah. And rather, for every ailment, they're giving us fake synthetic medication, which disrupts homeostasis within us even more. And this results in cascade of a lot of disorders: mental, physical, emotional. Yeah.
You can see how cancer is exploding after the drug companies put out their vaccine crap.
Yep.
You know, that big scam that they apparently got away with because the government's covering for them.
Yeah.
You know, the cancer is exploding. It's just exploding after that vaccine.
Yeah. Totally.
And especially the psychiatric drugs that they're putting out. You know, it's like, rely on these drugs to treat your mind. You're incapable of dealing with your problems yourself. You need antidepressants. You need lithium. You need antipsychotic drugs. I mean, those antipsychotic drugs are toxic. They're very toxic.
Yeah.
They're not abusable drugs. Nobody in their right mind wants to take them, and even people in their wrong mind that are crazy don't want to take them. Because their side effects are so awful.
Yes.
They cause all kinds of awful side effects. They should only be used when somebody is totally out of control. You know, the voices are so loud they've lost control of themselves. But what they do, and the drug companies have been trying to hide it, is these antipsychotic drugs, the phenothiazines, actually shrink the brain. They turn it into a shrunken walnut if this stuff is taken long enough. But the psychiatric mafia is saying, oh, well, there is no other cure. There is no other treatment for it. They have no idea what causes it. So like you were saying, Mohammed, if they don't know what it is, they make up a reason. And they've made up reason after reason after reason. And when it was found that these drugs, they started doing autopsies of patients who came out of psychiatric hospitals, state hospitals, were there a long time on these drugs. And patient after patient after patient they did autopsies on, they saw that their brains were shrunken like walnuts. There was significant neurological damage.
Well,
and they went, well, this is due to the medications, they say. And the drug companies and big pharma and the psychiatric mafia are going, oh, no, it's due to the schizophrenia. The schizophrenia did it. Just to blame it off of them. So the researchers started giving these drugs to monkeys and rats and mice and found that the same thing happened. Of course, they didn't cover that. That doesn't hit the mainstream news at all. They don't let it into the journals. But these drugs that they're using cause organic neurological damage with enough use. And so do their shock treatments. In the long run, if they're on these drugs for a long period of time, they're doing a lot more damage than they're doing good.
Is this not modern day sorcery?
It is.
Yeah.
They're getting away with it.
Yeah.
They're making $14.7 billion selling antipsychotic drugs worldwide. That are damaging people.
Brother Igor says in the chat that pharmakia is the term for sorcery in Greek, and Brother Imran is saying that pharmacy and pharaoh seem to be connected, like going back to the time of Moses and Pharaoh. The magic. We've got lots of these lessons in the Quran. It's just this is the first time, obviously, we're in conversation, but there's so much we've been discussing ourselves that it's just hard to see where to begin from, because everything you talk about is extremely relatable to everything that is in the Quran, whether that is magic, being in the form of fear. I'll leave you to tell the story, Jerry, but there's just so much. It's just hard to tell where to begin with.
Well, that's good to hear, because I've never read the Quran myself.
Right. Yeah, we have.
That's why we were so excited to speak to you, because your research is corroborated by the Quran, and us, we have been studying the Quran, and we have been seeing these things as well.
Yeah.
In the Quran, it's also Satan says to Allah that I will attack them. By them, it's implying Banu Adam, the children of Adam. Satan says to Allah, he will attack them from every direction, from above, from below, and we can see this now. They have hijacked the weather, they have hijacked the environment, they have hijacked the food, they have hijacked medication, they have hijacked even us. Our genome is under their control, and they have attacked us from everywhere. There is no escape route. So we can see this in our lives. Satan has done this.
Yeah, if anyone has any verses, please do share so that I can bring them up for Jerry. But yeah, the verse that you were speaking about is where Satan says in the Quran that he's going to get them from behind and in front and from the right and from the left. And a lot of people have said that this means, well, not a lot of people, some people say that this means, and the reason why I want to bring this up is because you mentioned how these entities, they bring up your memories, which is things of the past. So people say that when Satan says he's going to get us from behind, they say, oh, that's your depression from what happened before. And when Satan says he's going to get us from in front of us, it's what is we're anxious about what is coming before us. And when he says that he's going to come from the right and the left, it's some people say that that's pulling us to the extremes, extreme two choices that he always seems to kind of give us. But most of the time, the case is both options are a falsehood, So yeah, there is this, and the fact that people will ultimately become very ungrateful to the Creator as a result. Or so if anyone does have the verses, please do put them in the chat.
Well, I think it'd be a good idea to give Jerry maybe the context of where it all began.
Yeah.
Before even mankind comes down to earth, that this hatred, this jealousy that started in the heavens, then then you get the context of where did this hatred even begin, right? So when I guess the story starts where Allah asks the angels, including Iblis, which is the chief devil, to prostrate to Adam as an act of following the command of God. And Iblis, the chief devil, he said, "Why should I bow down to a lesser creation?" Right? So so he looks at Adam as in, like, he's lower than me. How can I bow down to someone that has less power than me? So he looked at him at his physical being and was completely void of the spiritual side of Adam, right? So, and then he makes an agreement with God that, give me till the day of judgment, and I'm going to destroy them. I'm going to sit on the path. So he's sitting on the path that we're trying to find to misguide all of us.
Yeah.
And the path of truth.
Yep. So
which is the path of truth, which is the path that we're trying to all, to be on.
So if I can show Jerry the context to that verse. So yeah, he says he's going to come. So I just want to...
He's here. He's here.
Huh?
He's here.
He's here. Yeah. Who's here?
He's getting all of us.
Yes.
There's one verse in the Quran that really grabbed my attention. Even though people send me verses every once in a while, and this was sent by a Dr. Ermark, and I think he's in Egypt.
Right.
Okay. I was dealing with him for a while. It's chapter 114 of the Quran.
Yes.
And it says, "In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, say, I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind, the King of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the sneaky whisperer, who whispers into the hearts of people from among the Jinn and among the people."
Right.
I mean, that hit right on. I mean, that was like a direct hit.
Yeah.
Because that's what they do. They whisper into your mind. They whisper into your ear. They tell you all this garbage that's false.
Yeah. So these are what you just referenced there, Jerry. This surah. So the whispers, if you look at the Arabic, is al-waswas. Yeah, al-waswas. So that's, you can already tell that sounds like whispers. And we found that this is actually in, I think, modern day Arabic. They refer to that as obsessions. So again, it just goes back to looking at your research with regards to, I think, OCD. Is OCD mentioned in your research?
Yes.
And
it's part of it.
Yeah. And it just makes sense that these whispers are like a form of obsessions that, Satan seems to get us in a loop. These obsessions, like how can you put it? Like compulsions. Yeah, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So yeah, he's compelling us with these voices are compelling us to do something, and they compel us to do it obsessively. That's the way I see this ultimately with this OCD. But they don't attribute that to something from Satan or his minions. Ultimately, they label that as a mental disorder. Yeah.
And psychiatry labeled almost everything a mental disorder.
Yeah.
I mean, and their only treatment for anything are their toxic drugs.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys dealt much with psychiatrists. I've dealt with them all my life.
Right.
I watched what they did in the state hospital. I watched what they do in the private hospitals. They only spend a few minutes with each client, maybe 15, 20 minutes at the most. Then they prescribe these drugs, and then they bring them back in a couple of weeks and say, well, how are your drugs doing? People are spiritual. The psychiatrists believe that all mental illness is due to some physical chemical imbalance of some kind.
Yeah.
And that was a lie put out by a drug company by the name of Eli Lilly when they came out with Prozac.
Right.
So they don't know what causes schizophrenia. They never have. But like somebody was saying, when they have to have something out of the confusion to make it look like they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So first they blame mothers. They said, "Oh, it's the mothers did something. That's why these people are crazy." And the mothers went, "We didn't do anything. What we do?" So they didn't buy that. So what they did is they then kicked it up into genetics. They said, "Oh, there's a schizophrenia gene.
Yeah.
There's a gene that's making people crazy."
Yeah, my family members were told this.
What they did is they took it from mothers that were observable and kicked it up into an area where 99% of the human race could not research it. Genetics. You got to be a biology whiz geneticist to debunk that. So it took probably decades and how many geneticists are interested in studying schizophrenia? Not many. So they got away with that for probably decades. Like, oh yeah, it's a genetic disorder. And then when they couldn't find a specific gene linked to schizophrenia, then they went, okay, it's a combination of genes. It's so complicated. Nobody in their right mind could ever understand it. Only geneticists could understand it, but it's the genes and there's nothing you can do about it except take our toxic medications. So the geneticists finally caught up with them and said, listen, we don't see anything genetic. There is no genetic schizophrenic gene. There is no combination of genetic schizophrenic genes that we can find. Dump this garbage.
The proof is not there. They say there's proof, but the proof is not there when you go to look for it.
No, there's no proof. And what happened is in the back in 1910 or something, the Carnegie and the Rockefellers took over the medical system with they paid off Congress to write laws saying that the only doctors that could be graduated from medical schools are the ones that have taken a pharmacology curriculum. Okay, so here's the drug companies right in there. They took over the medical system then. Okay, and it's still going on today. They're still teaching pharmakia in the medical schools.
It seems like to me the way they get it is once people have woken up to the lies, they've got a more impoverished group of people ready to get higher up in life. So now they will be the ones to study this for the hope of their future, whereas others have already woken up and now they're onto the alternative paths. So it's like they've always got their people ready. People like in other countries, maybe impoverished countries, people are looking for some way out. So it's like they've always got their next cattle ready to use to teach all of this.
They control it. They control the universities. They control the Senate. They control they have a very powerful, they're very rich. So they have a very powerful lobby. They control the Congress. They control the Senate. They bought off these people. These laws that they've made, for instance, you look at what's happening here. Somebody who's schizophrenic and hearing voices that he can't control and out of control. They have to go to a psychiatrist first. Okay? They can't just go into a pharmacy and get that stuff. The psychiatrists charge them, I don't know, $100, $250 for a consult. Okay, after you wait for weeks to get in, because they've got everybody convinced that medicines are the only treatment for anything. So these psychiatrists are backed up for some of them for months. You get in there, he spends no more than an hour with you, probably 45 minutes at the most, gives you a diagnosis, which is a bunch of crap that they just made up, and then gives you a prescription for an antipsychotic drug that costs probably $800 to $1,000 a month to stay sane on if you get it from a pharmacy here. Okay, and then it's toxic on top of that. You can go, I live 60 miles north of the Mexico border. We can drive across that border there and buy all the antipsychotic drugs we want for a small fraction of what it costs in the US, and we don't have to go to a psychiatrist. You get them over the counter like you get aspirin or Tylenol or something in our drugstores here, because those drugs are not abusable. Nobody in their right mind wants to take those. They're horrible. But the psychiatrists are ripping on, we got to control these drugs. We want the money. We want the control. We want the power. And we're going to hang on to these drugs. And we're not going to make them non-prescription. So in Mexico, you can go to a psychiatrist if you want. He'll write you out a prescription for a certain drug. It's an antipsychotic drug. You go to the drugstore and you just get it. And it's much cheaper. So here it'd be $800 to $1,000. There you can get a month's a month's worth of antipsychotic drugs for $75. So that's how much of a markup they got on these drugs. And they're just squeezing people to death, you know. And these are the people that can least afford it. You know, people
whilst
who are
robbing them, whilst
robbing them or their families blind.
Yeah.
You know, and then they go, oh, the medical costs in the U.S. are out of control.
Mm.
You know, and then there's certain drugs you can't even bring back. They're not dangerous, but you can't bring them across the border.
I mentioned just a little while ago that my family members were told this, what you were saying, from a psychiatrist, because I have a cousin who about, I think maybe 15, 20 years ago, when he first went to university, he must have ended up taking some kind of substance, not sure what exactly. As people do. Again, I think everyone knows what happens when they go to university, all kinds of things you're experiencing for the first time. But in my cousin's case, something happened, especially to him, right, that didn't happen to anyone else that we knew of. And they said that, oh, he's got, it was just too much pressure. He's got some kind of chemical imbalance in his brain, as you said. They blamed it on genetics, put him on drugs. And now, as you said, what does it do? It just shrinks your brain. Yeah. So, it's sad to see that, yeah, people end up losing their lives when, because under the name of science, under the name of genetics, under the name of, some kind of predisposition that this is your fate. Yeah, this is the fate that God handed you. Astaghfirullah. It's not the case. You're being taught a bunch of lies. So I was just thinking that this sorcery and witchcraft is, these are things that we've been looking at, like many, for the last few years. And so
just one thing I wanted to say, Dr. Jerry, if these mental disorders were actually emanating from chemical imbalances or genetic defects, then the outcome would be physiological damage. But in no case of schizophrenia or other mental disorder such as OCD do you see any physical manifestation. It's always something ethereal, something etheric that the patient is reporting, and that thing is unseen. So just by logical thinking, you can completely disprove the notion that these are arising from chemical imbalances or genetic defects.
Yeah, matter of fact, they don't have a single objective test of any kind to verify any of those diagnoses that they have in that DSM of theirs. They treat that thing like the Bible. They every single one of those diagnoses have been made up. They've taken segments of human behavior and they turned them all into disorders. They tried to make them diseases, but the medical establishment says, no, these don't meet the criteria for diseases. There is no germ. There is no physiological anything that we can find, that would match the description of a disease. So they stopped them there. So they changed them into disorders. Okay. And this is their Bible. They have this big fat book of mental illnesses, they call them, or disorders, they call them. And they've virtually made them all up.
Yep.
Like I said, there's not any objective tests. There's no EEG, EKG, blood tests, lab work. There's nothing that can determine objectively any of these disorders. So that whole DSM of theirs is a complete work of fiction.
Yeah.
And it looks so official. You open it up and here's all these mental disorders and classifications and subclassifications and these numbers. I mean, it looks like something really scientific that somebody worked on for a long time. They're making a fortune selling these things. They need to have a diagnosis to charge the insurance companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They have all this lingo in there that it's psychobabble that they communicate with. So every single one of the more than 296 diagnoses or psychiatric disorders in the DSM-5 and later have been completely made up by a group of psychiatrists that meets once every 2-3 years, and they make them up while they're meeting. 2/3 of them are associated with big pharma. So they belong to big pharma. So they I heard it was like a tobacco barn auction. So the guy comes in and goes, "Hey man, I got a new psychiatric disorder here," and he reads it off, and they all determine, can we charge for it? Can we put it in the DSM? Will people buy this kind of thing? And can we come up with a drug for it? And then they vote them in and they vote them out. So each edition of this DSM, their psychiatric Bible, has more and more disorders in it. They just make them up. So in 1952, the DSM-1 had 106 psychiatric diagnoses in it. In 1980, there were 256. The DSM-5 lists 297, and they're fabricating more all the time. So basically, the DSM, their Bible, is just a list of symptoms, behavioral symptoms. They're behaviors that these committees of psychiatrists have debated and decided which clusters are a mental disorder. They're the ones that determine it.
We heard you in conversation with Owen Benjamin, and it was funny hearing some of those examples, Paris syndrome, just all kinds of made up things. But ultimately they seem like I read your what you shared with me. What was it? Black toads.
Oh yeah.
I have to say to people, I mean, they should check this out on your website. I read Black Toads, and I literally jumped up. In reading Black Toads, I was sat down at the table, I was reading it, and I jumped up because I realized this is true. That this doctor that is there saying this psychobabble which you're speaking about, which really isn't provable, it's nonsense, but it's some kind of sorcery that when that person now believes it, they're actually going to get this disease that they've been listening to and they believed from this person wearing a white coat. So now they've actually manifested, this within their body. It sounds like something, as you'd say, science fiction, but it's the truth. How we manifest our own beliefs by listening to these people in white lab coats.
Yeah, that was a true story.
Yeah.
So and they're spreading this pharmakia stuff of theirs into the kids now. The number of children and adolescents in the United States on psychiatric drugs is now over 7 million and growing.
Yeah.
More are starting. They're starting on kids younger and younger.
Yeah.
And 1 million of them are on antipsychotic drugs. These drugs destroy their brain, and they're putting kids on them.
Yeah. Brother Igor, sorry if I can, Jerry. Yeah, Brother Igor, you've been sharing some very insightful stuff in the chat. If you want to comment, you've just said toads are used traditionally in witchcraft rituals.
Just peace, brother. I just when you mentioned the toads on your Telegram, I was just thinking well, that's usually what we associate with black cauldrons and I think in
imagery.
Like the ingredients for these kind of I guess you would call them potions, but today we would call them drugs. Just interesting because we see this kind of imagery in fiction and fantasy movies, and part of us knows that there's something real about this unseen world, whether or not we understand there to be a revelation or not. Everybody has a feeling or inclination that there is truth that's outside of our perception. And when Jerry was mentioning one time how these entities see us like cattle, it's very, very palpable that our society is structured in a way to basically reinforce that model, as if the people that run the world are more or less following these things. And even in the Quran, we have so many references to cattle as an analogy for human beings, especially those that are actually blind in their hearts. They have eyes with which they do not see, ears with which they do not hear. They're actually more astray than what we would call livestock today, because they're not only a food source for these things, but they're actually, they have no senses to discern with their reasoning that they're in fact being like really like farmed. You know, even the word pharmacy, it just kind of, it fits so perfectly. Even the sound of these you know, words, because obviously language reveals so many, you know, truths. But I just listening to that story, man, that was really something.
Yeah.
That's a true story. I mean, I'll never forget that one. She had actually murdered somebody, but she didn't come out and say it.
Yes.
Did that come across in the story?
Yes, it did at the very end. This was like someone could make a movie from what you experienced there. Yeah,
I should put more of those stories out. I got lots of them.
Yeah.
You know, I've kind of.
But I mean, as far as we're concerned, in the Quran, self-defense is okay, or you know, killing someone. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what she did. Did she? Yeah, she killed her husband because. Yeah, this is interesting how it's.
She killed the guy who she was molested as a child.
Yes.
And her young daughter was molested as a child.
Yeah.
So she killed the guy who molested her daughter.
Yeah.
And got apparently got away with it.
Yeah.
You know, but she was very careful with how she worded that.
Yes. Exactly.
And Dr. Jerry, sorry, I've been meaning to say this, but like in my observation, mainly people who kill themselves in suicide, or people who really suffer with depression, oftentimes if you really dig into their past, you can see that they've been sexually molested. And you know, with these recent coverages in media, for example, Epstein Island and all these things, we can see what the elites do in their secret parties. And eventually, I think what happens is these children who have been kidnapped and sexually molested, they just end up becoming drug addicts and severely depressed schizophrenics who end up killing themselves. And if I use my rationale, I can see that Allah has created us, God has created us as fortified beings, protected beings. And one of the main ways through which a person's psyche or a person's fortification can be weakened is by sexual molestation. I think it opens up that person to intervention from the dark realms, and we can see this.
It does a horrendous amount of damage, and the U.S. government right now is one of the biggest. They're complicit in one of the biggest child sex trafficking scandals on the face of the planet. You look at like, what is there, like 87,000 children that they've lost track of coming across the border. They didn't even have to have a place for them. All they had to have is an address, and they would ship these kids to these addresses. They're powering across the border by themselves, unprotected. They're damaging these youngsters that are going to be citizens horrendously. You know, it's horrendous the amount of damage that does. Being a therapist, I deal with it frequently. It just really tears these people up. It makes a mess of them. And here's the government, you know, protecting these child molesters. You know, like look at all these people that went to Epstein Island, all these politicians that were there, and look how hard they fought to keep that Epstein list from becoming public information. They fought that tooth and nail for years. You know, finally it came out. You know, and you know, what was it? The Catholic Church, when they find out these priests are molesting people, they don't get rid of them. They just move them somewhere else. I heard the Mormons did the same thing. You know, it just does so much damage. These people should be executed, in my opinion. Just get rid of them. They cause so much damage to youngsters that it's incredible.
What you've shown, Jerry, in your research is that we become food source for these entities. I think it might have been in one of your discussions, you were mentioning how they need us. They can't experience anything, so they need us to experience. So if they want to drink, they need to drink through us. They need to eat through us. And this is ultimately what we believe. If we are not protected, then then we become vessels for them. If we're not doing the right things according to the Quran, then we become vessels for them. And this is what Brother Muhammad was mentioning about these people with sexual trauma. So what I've seen is that they manipulate us by trauma, and that trauma could be imposed upon us, or it could be from us sinning. So therefore, we've created a trauma of our own. That's how I see this. Either us sinning, which we are traumatizing ourselves, or we are actually innocent. We haven't committed any sin, and someone is committing that trauma upon ourselves. So either way, involuntarily or voluntarily, trauma seems to be the root to which all of this happens.
Virtually all psychological disorders are due to some kind of trauma. And then there lies on top of it. They don't mess with the trauma. You won't find 99% of the psychiatrists won't deal with trauma. All they do is give you drugs to kind of drug you down. They don't deal with the cause.
Numb you down.
Which the mace energy method does. It deals with the cause of the mental illness, and in most cases will get rid of it in like an hour. But these people, the pharmakia, it was where this biochemical imbalance crap came from. I mean, this is another lie that they fostered on the entire population of the planet. Okay, it was not until late 1980s, after the release of the landmark antidepressant Prozac, that the idea of a chemical imbalance hit the psychiatric mainstream. Okay, so it didn't exist until then. So, as Peter Brigham, a psychiatrist in 1991, pointed out in his book Toxic Psychiatry, the drug company Eli Lilly advanced the chemical imbalance theory as a marketing scheme to sell their new drug Prozac. They made it up out of nowhere. They needed some explanation for why mental illness happens. So they didn't have one, so they just made one up. And they're teaching it in the universities now. It's a lie. There were no demonstrable evidence showing that the depressed patients had any kind of chemical imbalance. And it's the same thing with schizophrenics. There's no evidence of a chemical imbalance in their brain. But Eli Lilly ran with it. They knew it was a lie, and they put it out anyway. Before long, psychiatrists and psychiatric patients came to identify with the idea that mental disorders are caused by chemical imbalances in the brain. And it's a complete fabrication. It's a total lie. They have no evidence for it whatsoever. Matter of fact, I noticed that when I was working at one of the biggest psychiatric hospitals on the planet when I first went to work. I was brainwashed in school too to believe, oh yeah, mental illnesses are a chemical imbalance of the brain. That's what they taught us. And we didn't have any access to a clinical population, so there was no way for us to check that out. And we only began to get access to a clinical population a little bit in the master's degree. And then in the PhD, also, there was no access to a clinical population of any significant deal. I mean, you could not get into most mental health centers. You could not get into a psychiatric hospital. You couldn't get into a prison and work with mentally ill people. They would not let you in, nor will they let researchers into those places. In the entire, 45 years I spent working on the front lines of mental health, I never saw a researcher on the front lines. All this garbage comes out of the universities. So the universities are now pushing this false chemical imbalance theory. That's what they're teaching to the thousands of psychiatrists and psychologists that they graduate every year, that it's a chemical imbalance and the only way to treat it is through their toxic drugs. It's a total fabricated lie that they've hit the entire planet with it. They've got the entire planet believing that the only way to treat any kind of mental illness is with their toxic drugs. The total fabrication.
Yeah, brother Joel in the comments, he says, hurt people. If you get that. Hurt people, as in people who are hurt other people. Yeah. So what we're experiencing is these people are truly hurt and they are trying to hurt us. That's what it is. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's like that story, Black Toads.
Yeah.
That the mother was molested.
Mm.
Okay. And
Yeah.
now the child was molested, and
Yeah.
and that just gets passed on.
Yeah.
You know, males who are molested, they molest others. It just goes on and on and on. It's got to be stopped.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, you look at the Western Mental Health Center. You know, here we have more psychiatrists, more psychologists, more psychiatric drugs on this planet than we've ever had in the history of mankind. Okay. There's over 50,000 people in the United States who commit suicide, who kill themselves every single year. A great majority of them on antidepressant drugs. You know, that's as many people as were killed in Vietnam. Year after year. This is just 1 year.
We
it's
are
year after year after year after year.
We're in a different kind of war, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a different kind of war. Yeah. So you know, and here they are pushing. You know, they have all these drugs, all these psychiatrists, and yet we're more mentally ill than we've ever been in the history of mankind. I mean, between 2000 and 2018, suicide rates increased 37%. An estimated 24 veterans are killing themselves every day in the U.S. You know, and from 2006 to 2016, the suicide rate increased by 2% a year, with 1.4 million suicide attempts in 2017 and 47,000 deaths. This is the report card for the psychiatric mafia and big pharma. I'd say this is a good solid F. You know, 10,000 Americans are diagnosed with schizophrenia every year. And schizophrenia is among the top 10 health problems on the planet. And they're pushing this lie that it's caused by a chemical imbalance. Okay? According to the Center for Disease Control, the U.S. suicide rates have reached the highest level since World War II. Assaults, murders are increasing every year, with the prison population just blowing the walls off the prison. They are overcrowded prisons. They have to build more and more prisons. You know, does this look like it constitutes an effective mental health system to you? This is disgusting.
Absolutely not.
It's based on lies. It's based on propaganda. And it's based on deception. Nobody is getting better with the current mental health system, with the psychiatric mafia in control. They're like the ancient Egyptian priests, you know.
Absolutely.
They haven't done any studies on the voices at all. They just want, we hereby pronounce that the voices are hallucinations. They haven't done a single study on any of those voices. Nowhere. They just publish it. They just say it, and the only treatment is drugs.
Yeah,
that's far from the truth. You know, far from the truth. You know, matter of fact, a lot of people are saying they get better quicker without those drugs.
Yeah, I saw.
Dr. Jerry, when I look into these things, it seems to me that the people who are at the helm of, let's say, the psychiatric mafia, the pharmaceutical industry, the government, the priest class, people who hold positions of leadership, commit acts which humiliate themselves in order to gain favor with the higher ranking demonic principalities. And in turn, the people they victimize through sexual molestation or other acts through war, the people that are the victims are attacked by the lower ranked principalities. And these lower ranked principalities are the ones which are causing these OCD like whispers to prepare people for possibly a future alien invasion as they're perpetuating.
Oh yeah, they got that plan too. They were planning that, you know, back in the 50s. They were planning that. You know, and now you're seeing this now, you know.
And eventually what will happen is that the people who have been plagued their entire lives through these whispers from the lower ranked demons, when they see the higher ranked demons finally make an appearance, they will accept them as gods because they have been misled their whole life. So you can see that they have carefully produced a structure of evil through which they are attacking people of different classes.
Yep. They're hitting everybody. And people need to realize that these things are they're also parasites. One thing I noticed with when I was working with schizophrenics, and I first started working with them in this big giant psychiatric hospital where I went to work when I started. There were over 10,000 psychiatric patients in that hospital. It was the size of a small town. There was every mental illness known to man in that place somewhere. And with me being an adrenaline junkie and interested in abnormal psychology, it was like a kid walking into a candy store. It was like, wow, look at this. What causes all this? Why is this? They didn't have any answers.
Yeah.
And you look in their DSM, all those things are descriptions of mental disorders. There is no cure for them. There is no treatment for them. They always go to the drugs.
Yeah.
It's drugs. And even now, I mean, I pulled this a few weeks ago. This came from WebMD. It's like here they are saying schizophrenia is genetic. They said doctors don't think there's just one schizophrenia gene. Instead, they think it takes many genetic changes or mutations to raise your chances of having mental illness. You're more likely to get schizophrenia if someone in your family has it. If it's a brother, sister, whatever, your chances increase by 10%. They don't look at the fact that the way a schizophrenic treats their daughter or son actually contributes. They're blaming it all on genes, and they have no evidence for this whatsoever. And this was just taken off the internet just weeks ago. They're still doing it, even though they know it's a complete fabricated lie. They're still pushing it to sell their drugs.
Saying that it's the genes is another way of saying this is the fate that you've been handed. Yeah,
right.
This is the fate, and this is what we have been awakening ourselves as quote unquote Muslims following the Quran. We have been awakening to the fact that we've also been taught this lie. Well, I'm just going to say outright that everything is
We
fate.
all have.
Yeah, that everything is fated. This is the form of control. This is even something that the Muslims are victim of, that they're taught that something along the lines of, I won't go into this right now, but this whole idea of fate, it's one of their weapons, it seems, to try to tie people down to acceptance. That don't question it, don't argue about it, don't dig deep, don't find it. This is the fate that you've been handed, and don't just leave it there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Jerry,
that's kind of what you face in school, all the way in undergraduate school and graduate school, all the way to the PhD program. Don't question us.
Yeah.
We are the ones, we are the masters. We will teach you. You don't question us. And I got in a lot of trouble for questioning them. They didn't like it. And the higher you went, the more they disliked it.
Yeah.
They hated being questioned much more in the PhD program than they did in the master's program or undergraduate program. They do not want to question anybody questioning their authority or what they're saying. And what they're teaching, for the most part, is a complete bunch of lies. And they're profiting from it greatly.
I saw that in the psychology department because I did a degree in psychology, and I saw that. And this was, I did it as an adult. I went 10 years later than most people. And this is the problem I had. I was asking questions as well when everyone else was just swallowing everything.
Yeah.
And I was asking questions like, okay, this doesn't make sense. They were showing me how insignificant data can be published to make a journal. I mean, to make an article in a journal saying that this is proof that this is what happened scientifically, even though the data was insignificant. Because
I experienced that firsthand in the PhD program. One day in the second year of the program, the head of the psychology department, the PhD psychology department, pulled all of us together.
Yeah.
And he was teaching a seminar on how to lie with statistics.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there looking at this, and I'm going, wait a minute. I wasn't no statistic expert, but I had a number of statistic courses under my belt before I got there.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this and I'm going, hey, that doesn't make sense. You're treating this, top 5% of this population as if it's the entire population.
Yeah.
Well, how can you do that? And he said, well, if they're too stupid to know that that's what I'm doing, that's their problem. And I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was just absolutely shocked. There was one other guy in the program who turned around and we looked at each other like, what?
What? Exactly.
You know, like how can they? And then we had to snap back real quick before he saw us.
Yeah.
You know, because if he would have spotted us, that would have been it. And all the rest of the students are sitting there like, oh yeah, that's how it's done.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my head was just blown wide open. It's like, what is going on in this place?
Because the only reason why I went to study psychology was so that I can help people. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, okay, I thought there was only good people in psychology, but it clearly looks like it's not the case. You got people who are out there to make something, you know, for themselves by whatever means. Yeah.
Yeah. No, if you really want to help people, now I've got 4 years of undergraduate psychology from Temple University. I've got a master's degree in counseling from the University of Georgia. I got 2 years in a PhD program. You know, if you and there was nothing there that could clinically help anybody.
Yeah.
You know, that there was maybe a handful of things that I learned were useful, but clinically, there was nothing there. Nothing that really worked. If you really want to help somebody, go to causesandinstitute.com/therapy and learn. You know, get certified in the MACE energy method. It's an energetic psychotherapy that goes in there and it will actually remove or disable psychological disorders that these drug people are drugging people for.
Right.
In an hour, it will get rid of a major depression or a child molestation or something in an hour, and it never comes back.
And I know you've become a practitioner in the last year.
I did. When I saw how well it worked, I did it.
Right.
You know, and if you're really interested in helping people, I can look into it.
I've bought the book. I'm going to be having a look. But I want to ask you about that. Because again, reading a lot of your material from your website, I was thinking, without knowing what this MACE method is, I was thinking, and it's clear that it's about getting to the root cause, which we seem to bury, these traumas. So I was going to ask, is this some form of detoxing ourselves of something that is flammable inside us, some kind of something that is stored that is flammable, and therefore these entities are regularly inflaming it? You know, it's like things that we've left buried. So that makes me wonder about when they talk about every disease, or I think, is it Bruce Lipton? He says every disease comes from acidity or inflammation. I'm thinking, is this what this is? This inflammation is being inflamed, by these entities because of things that we have not doused ourselves. You know, we haven't, we've left it there for them to easily just fire us up every time. Yeah.
Well, what happens is during a trauma, okay, you have an overwhelming negative feeling. Right. All your attention is centered on you. Right. Okay. So you go like, okay, I can't function with this awful feeling. I don't like feeling it, and I don't like it hanging around. So you know how they say time, cures all ills. No. What happens is the ego jumps in and it goes, let me handle this. And it takes it and it buries that trauma in your subconscious. And then it covers it over and battens down the hatch.
Yes, absolutely.
It's still buried alive. So when something that was similar to that trauma, or another person who is similar to the person who created that trauma shows up in your psychic sphere, that thing starts oscillating and it wants to get out. So it'll tell you either you attack that person or you run from that person or you avoid that person. Right. And that happens over and over and over again because that thing's stuck in there. It's like a computer virus that doesn't come out. Right. So it's like a mental computer virus. What MACE does is it goes in there and it disarms that virus. It disarms that thing. Right. So there's no longer any reaction.
So can you explain in the Black Toads, the transcript, you had that lady, I've got this part where it says, only one other patient has told me of hearing a screaming baby as one of her voices, and she had an abortion. So can you explain that to me? As in, like, is this unresolved trauma manifested as a demon? Well,
And if I remember correctly, that was a patient who had an abortion.
Right.
And
She's hearing screaming babies
she
because
was
of
hearing,
that. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So
Repressed regret, perhaps. The regret takes form of
yeah.
outburst, perhaps, right?
Yeah, or it might be that she was actually hearing, you know, the
incident.
Yeah, the incident, or you know, a ghost baby.
Right.
You know,
Well,
because
yeah.
a lot of these, especially there's all kinds of different levels of these demons.
Yeah.
Okay, you got the earthbound ones that are like alcoholics and drug addicts that haven't crossed over to the other side.
Right.
You know, and there was one that I heard of that when he was asked, well, why haven't you crossed over to the other side? Why haven't you gone into the light? And he said, well, my mistress and my wife are both over there. I don't want to deal with them. You know, he didn't want to get caught. So,
well,
the alcoholics, they don't realize this, but I've talked to a number of people who can see these earthbound spirits, and they hang around bars.
Right.
They wait for somebody to get drunk enough, and then they jump in there and they take over the drinking.
Yeah.
You know, that's why they lose control of their drinking. So I had an Apache, like an evil medicine man, an evil drunken Apache medicine man, who told me these stories when I was in the prison. And he could cast spells on people, and he would work with spirits. And he could see spirits, and he had them chase him. And there were all these weird stories he told me. And then once I asked him, I said, well, if you can do all that, how come you can't stay sober? And he said, it's because of the spirits of dead alcoholics. They can't experience being high in a spiritual state. So they have to jump into people and get them to drink in order for them to get high. Same thing with drug addicts.
Right. Okay. So these entities, as far as I can tell, in the Quran, they were here before us. Because if you look in the Quran, it's got this verse here: when your Lord said to the angels, "I am placing a successor on earth," yeah, in the form of Adam. This is the verse which is speaking about where the Creator is placing Adam on earth, and he says that he's a successor on earth. So this is an indication that these people were here on earth before us, these entities. And that's what it seems like. I mean, Brother Eagle can maybe correct me if I'm wrong on that in the understanding.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It seems like just like in Christianity and maybe mythological stories, these what we would call demons or jinns or entities, they have archons. They have very long lifespans, and they absolutely predate humanity. They have, according to the Quran, they have tribes, peoples, nations. They seem to have different species even, and they have free will just like us. But the only difference is their constitution is fundamentally different. The Quran mentions that they're made of a special type of fire, which would be kind of around about the fourth state of matter or plasma, which is interesting in Dr. Marzinsky's work. When you were talking about the experience of the welding torch, it just made me think about this idea of a smokeless fire or electrical kind of phenomena of plasma. And basically their awareness is very much like to us would be superhuman, to be able to fly and just transcend a lot of the boundaries of time and space. But clearly, they're not gods. And a lot of them, it seems like, are transgressing this agreement, this kind of prime directive to not interact with us, because their world is fundamentally, there's like a barrier, and the ones that cross that barrier to talk to us and to influence us, they don't have basically they have a negative agenda where we're concerned. It's really hard to discuss this in the 21st century because the connotations are that at any moment, just unbeknownst to us, outside of our five senses, we have however many spirits or entities, whether around us, in our vicinity, perhaps within us. And the idea is that they're meant to be invisible for a reason. Like even the word jinn in Arabic is based on a root word that refers to concealment or hiding or something beyond a veil. And even the word for madness or insanity, someone that's possessed, is the same thing. It would be called majnoon, someone who's possessed, is basically insane. It's the same word. Possession and insanity is directly the same word in Arabic.
They see us from where we see them not.
Cannot see them.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
They have a vantage point over us.
I wish I had all of the verses prepared for you, Jerry. We're still studying them, but everything that you have, it's all in alignment with what is in the Quran. There's so many verses. You mentioned that there's 23 verses in the Bible speaking about Jesus casting out demons. We can give you a whole huge portfolio of work that we've just started right now that is in the Quran, not just about casting, not just about all sorts, from Satan, his way about him, what he's enticing us to do, how he does it with his tribe, why this is happening from the very beginning. It's all in there. But the fact is, unfortunately, and the Creator actually says this in the Quran, that very few will actually read, very few will actually listen. Most people who call themselves Muslims today, they just follow another priest class. They don't actually read for themselves. So they're taught a lot of stories. And as you rightly said, the Muslims are more aware, it seems. So even what they're taught, it does include this reality that these voices exist from the jinn. But even then, when you study the Quran for yourself, you find more answers of what is happening and why, which most people will not be aware of. So plenty more to go.
Also, one thing from Dr. Jerry, the Quran hints that there is that the jinn realm has a hierarchy. There are rankings.
It does.
So there will be really powerful jinn like Ifrit, Marid, and these are like they have a much bigger agenda. It is perpetual war against humanity.
Yes.
And I think this is somewhat corroborated by Christianity, by the fallen angels, the watchers, the archons. But the ones that are causing the voices are, I think, foot soldiers or minions.
Yes.
And I've heard you make a very interesting mention. You said that these lower ranked entities, which are like the foot soldiers, which cause these voices, they are told by the higher principalities that they don't have light within them, and that's why they perform these activities. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, and that came from there was a period of time where I was actually talking to them, carrying on conversations with the voices through this schizophrenic patients that I was working with. And that's what came out. There is a hierarchy with these big ones at the top that kind of remind me of the Nephilim.
Yes, the Nephilim, the fallen angels.
They're like warriors, and that they're at the top of the heap. And then you have a series of like lieutenants and then sergeants,
yes.
and that after that. There was one time where I had gotten rid of 2 of the foot soldiers out of one guy, and then all of a sudden he says he's hearing voices again. And I said, well, where'd that one come from? He said, well, that's the sergeant. He's pissed off that you got rid of these other 2, And in talking to the lower ones, they're miserable. They're upset. They don't like it, but they don't see any other choice that they have. That they're like slaves. They've been told that if they don't do what they're instructed to do, that they will cease to exist. They've been told that the light is dangerous, that they have no light in them, and to avoid the light. So, I mean, everything is created by God, including these things. They have light in them, but it's a very dim light.
Right.
So if you can walk them down there and get them to see that, what surprised me is when that's done and they see that there's a very dim light in them, and then you ask them, like, okay, you see it yourself. You know, you were told you didn't have any light in you by your superiors. How do you feel about that? And they got furious. They were angry. That totally surprised me. I mean, because these entities were duplistic. They were sucking off of their host. They were causing misery. But to be lied to about that, of all things, really, really got them angry. The other thing they really don't want the human race to know is that they're parasites. They're actually sucking our life energy out of us. You can see that with schizophrenics. I remember when I first started working at the state hospital, I noticed that before the schizophrenics attacked, the patient had a lot of energy. After the voices attacked them, they had no energy. Half of them couldn't even get out of bed. You know, and that was consistent. So, you know, I started doing a little experiment with that.
And this is labeled as depression today. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's depression, and yeah, it would come across as depression because you are depressed. You don't have any energy. You know, so I started taking, getting a list of statistics, like how many people felt, you know, a scale of 1 to 10. How much energy did you have before the voices came? How much energy you have after the voices came? And then we ran an analysis of variance on it, and it was statistically significant. You know, that's more than any of the psychiatrists have ever done about the voices. You know, they just go, "Oh, they're hallucinations." And who's going to study a hallucination except maybe somebody crazy like me? You know, I just didn't trust them. I didn't trust them from undergraduate school. Matter of fact, I was born with a great mistrust of authority. And one of the things I hated most about psychology is the whole first 4 years, there was virtually no way to check out for yourself anything that they were teaching you other than in the rat lab and experimental psychology. All the rest, it was like, oh, just believe us. This is the truth. No, that didn't go well with me. You know?
Well, this is why I see you in a special light, a bit like Jordan Peterson. I'm not saying that Jordan Peterson, I'm not trying to say he's a great person or anything. I'm just saying the fact that Jordan Peterson, people listen to him because of the fact that it seemed like a unique fact that he's worked in the clinical field as well as taught and been in the research. Whereas I think you mentioned, or was it someone else, that most people are either kept in the research environment or they're kept in a clinical environment, but they keep those two separate. You know, so the two divisions never really communicate with each other. You're either working in the lab or you're away from the research environment. But you've clearly worked in both fields. You've been in the education field and you've been in the clinical environment. You've been in the prisons. You've been in the mental institutes. You've had the best, it seems like the best variety of lab rats, you could say. To work with.
I've worked in virtually every mental health facility that the United States has. You know, mental health centers, state hospitals, private psychiatric hospitals. My last 10 years were spent doing psych crisis in the emergency rooms of large hospitals. So I've done it all. I've seen it all. And what they're doing is a bunch of crap.
Right.
With these drugs.
Jordan Peterson, in my opinion, is guilty of explaining these things as symbology, and he has a lot of lectures about the Bible, and for him, God, demons, everything is just symbolic. He diminishes the significance of these things, and he makes them redundant. But Dr. Jerry sees the reality of these things, and these things are very real. They're not symbology; they're very real.
If I can bring you back to the parasites you were mentioning, Jerry, because I know we've got lots on this. Again, we could go on all day probably on this parasites.
That's one of the things that they get very angry over. is when I would tell a patient that they were parasites and that they were sucking their life energy, they would get furious. They did not like them knowing that at all.
Yeah.
So if the patient was going to go off, they would go off with that piece of information. So I had to be very careful about who I gave that to, especially working in the emergency room. They didn't want you doing therapy in the emergency room. They wanted you to get those guys out of the emergency room. That's all they wanted. They didn't want you spending time with them, talking to them, trying to help them. They wanted you to just get them out.
Yeah.
You know, and clear the beds for people who were physically sick. The doctors didn't know what to do with psychiatric patients. They had no idea what to do with them. They didn't understand them. They didn't want to understand them. They didn't want anything to do with them. You know, so they turn them over to psychiatry, and psychiatry would drug them.
Right. So before we looked at your work, most of us were already familiar with the fact that we're being faced with huge attacks from both big tech and big pharma. We recognize this. I think many of us recognize this in this great awakening, if that's what we want to call it, for now, for lack of a better term. But what I'm seeing is that it seems to be mirrored. These parasites, as you mentioned, like vampires sucking out energy, which are the Jinn, which are the demons, which are the invisible and negative entities. Their behavior, this parasitical behavior, sucking out energy, mirrors what big tech is also doing. It's like bullies. This big tech is bullying us with the technology that we are stuck with. They're bullying our attention. They're bullying our minds and sucking our energy in a similar way to how even the big pharma is doing. They're bullying us into taking their poisons, and sucking our energy. It's like these parasites seems to be mirrored from these entities to big tech to big pharma. You know, it's sorcery and witchcraft throughout all of these. Yeah. So if anyone wanted, if anyone has any questions for Jerry on the parasites, please.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Dr. Jerry. Oh, sorry, brother.
No, go ahead, buddy. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, Dr. Marzinsky, because in one of your discussions, you had mentioned that something that had puzzled you was how does this parasite, unlike other parasites in nature, always push the victim, the human host, to suicide, which was, from an Islamic standpoint, is very much forbidden. And oftentimes, I mean, it's like the hereafter is in jeopardy in an act like that, because you are taking, matters into your own hands, onto a body that God has given you, that belongs to him, that you're basically leasing for a period of time. And I just wanted to hear maybe, what your findings are on why is the suicide rate so high when it comes to these things, and why would a parasite of this nature aspire to, effectively kill its host in the end.
Well,
that
all
it's
I can
feeding
say
from.
that doesn't seem to make any sense, and I don't have a good answer to that. Why would they kill their food source?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if they follow them into the afterlife and the food source becomes a demon. I don't know. But I never could answer that question. What I can tell you is that they absolutely hate the human race. They can't stand the human race, and they particularly hate children. They hate children with a it's like a hatred that is just unfathomable, and that's part of what all this child molestation stuff is about.
Satanic ritual abuse and
ritual abuse. It's to destroy the children.
Yeah.
Or to mess up the children, and then that just breeds for generation after generation after generation. It just goes for generations of damage. Where it's just perpetuated on and on and on and on, which is so disgusting when you think that the United States government is a major trafficker in child molestation. Look what's happening in the border right now. And it's like, here's these Democrats up there. Oh no, leave the border open at all costs. Somebody's making an absolute fortune selling kids. And they've paid off these SOBs up there in the Senate, and it's not that, it's not just the Democrats. there's Republicans that are in on this too.
Absolutely.
On both sides.
Both sides.
Mm.
I remember one time a prisoner came to me while I was formulating these patterns. Okay, and I got to wondering, like, what would happen if I started throwing monkey wrenches in these patterns. So when I was working in the prison, I had a group of maybe 12 or 15 psychotic inmates who agreed to tell me in real time what their voices were telling them while we were working together. So normally they won't talk about it. Normally the voices won't let them talk about it. And when I was doing that in the state hospital, I got called up in front of the two psychiatrists, and told to stop asking questions about their voices, that their voices were hallucinations, and that by asking questions about them, I was inflaming those hallucinations or reinforcing those hallucinations and making these people sicker. That was a complete bunch of crap. And I knew it at the time, but you can't say anything to the psychiatrists. Their egos are out of control. They're just, out of control. But, they would tell me stuff about what the voices were saying. So when I started interfering with these patterns, they started coming back and saying, hey, the voices don't like what you're doing. They don't like you interfering with what they're doing. And it was one after another, after another, after another. They all came back and said the voices don't like that. Then I basically went, well, tough crap. I'm not stopping. So one day, one of the guys who was making fairly good progress, but he was still hearing voices, he gets into the medical unit. I don't know how he got in there without a pass, but he gets in there. He comes and he knocks on my door in the psychology department, and he said, the voices want to talk to you. And I'm like, what, they want to talk to me personally? He said, yeah, they want to talk to you personally. That had never happened before. In like 20 years, that had never happened. It was always, the patient would tell me what the voices were saying. They never spoke to me directly. It was always through the patient. So this was a new twist, and I wasn't completely, I didn't want to believe that these voices were entities. I just didn't want to believe it. I was thinking, well, something's wrong with their mind. It's some, subconscious something or other. I mean, even though I had overwhelming evidence that they were, I still didn't want to believe it. So this guy knocks on the door, and I open the door, and he goes, the voices want to talk to you. And I'm like, that kind of took me back. And I said, they want to talk to me personally? He said, yeah, they want to talk to you personally. I said, okay, come on in, sit down, close the door. And I said, what do they got to say? And these words came out of his mouth. You have no right to interfere with our way of life. Boom. Just like that. My head just exploded. It was at that moment that there was no doubt in my mind that these things were entities. This wasn't some subconscious figment of their imagination. This wasn't no hallucination. This, our way of life, plural. And then the prisoner goes, I didn't say that. That they said that. No, I had nothing to do with it. They just used my voice to tell you that. And then I said, tell them this. Or I forgot what I told them to tell them, but he said, I don't need to tell them. They can hear everything you say. They can see everything you do.
Yeah, this is the uncomfortable. Yeah, this is the uncomfortable thing. Admitting that they are always there. I think this is what people want to believe, that at any point in their day they're not there. This is why people don't want to admit that. I mean, this is something I had to accept myself. Once I started listening to your work earlier this month, I became conscious that, okay, I'm going to bed and they're there. I need to pray. I'm going here now. They're there. I need to pray. I need to be careful what I'm doing, what I'm showing, everything, And I think it's only a good thing because you become stronger in that way. But when you don't believe, then I think that does make you susceptible to, more wrong.
It sure does. The only way to keep them off your back is to get on a spiritual path toward God and stay there. And keep growing on that path, because they will do everything they can to rip you off of that path.
Exactly.
They don't want you on that path. Emanuel Swedenborg, he was a Christian mystic. He lived some 300 years ago. He was given complete access to heaven and hell. So he would go, he was like one of the top scientists of his day. He was the chief mining engineer for the Queen of Sweden, making her a fortune. And he invented mining equipment, and he was he was like the Leonardo da Vinci of his day. Mm-hmm. At the age of 50, Jesus showed up and said, okay, stop all this scientific stuff. I'm going to give you access to heaven and hell. I want you to go to both places and interview the spirits that are living there, and then come back and write about them so the human race knows what heaven and hell are like. And that's exactly what he did. One of his first books was called Heaven and Hell by Emanuel Swedenborg. Mm-hmm. He gives you a complete tour of what it's like there and the different levels,
right,
all through there.
Mm.
But he says that you are assigned 2 guardian angels, at least 2 guardian angels and 2 demons.
Mm.
Everybody's assigned 2.
Mm.
So that's what got me with.
That's what we believe as well, right? That's what we believe. I think that's what we believe. 2 angels, 2 devils. Is that right, brothers?
Yeah. Everybody has at least 2. I guess the people who are like psychotic killers and stuff have a whole bunch of demons and a couple of overwhelmed angels.
Right.
But he said that they're always speaking to you. He said that the negative ones, the negative voices, they speak in your language. They will barge into your mind. They will put their thoughts in your mind. They have no there's nothing that prevents them from doing that. Mm-hmm. Now the good ones, they're not allowed to interfere with your free will. Mm-hmm. You have to give them permission, and you have to ask them for help, or they won't give it to you. Mm-hmm. Because they can't interfere without your permission.
Right.
Now, the negative ones can. Now the good ones usually speak in feeling, intuition, and serendipity.
Mm-hmm.
These are
gut feeling.
Yep, feeling. Feeling and things that happen that like you're thinking about something and somebody drives a truck in front of you that has some phrase on it that relates to what you were thinking about, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the only time I've heard them come out and actually order somebody to not do something were people that were on the verge of death. They were about to kill themselves. And these things interfered. And I saw that abundantly when I was working in the emergency room in psych. There were people who survived suicide attempts that should not have lived by any stretch of the imagination. They should not have been alive in front of me at that minute.
Right.
And one of the first that kind of jumps out at me is one lady who everything was going wrong in her life. She got a divorce. She lost her job. She didn't have any money. She had a teenage kid. Everything was going wrong with her. Mm-hmm. And so she goes, I'm done. I'm going to kill myself. And she didn't want to do it herself. So what she did is she got drunk and drugged up, and she went to a train track in a small town outside of here and was waiting on that track for the train to come by. And she was talking to her sister in San Diego, telling her sister goodbye when she saw the train coming. So she hung up, and as the train approached, she drove her car onto the railroad track in front of this train. So there's no way for it to stop. And that train hit her and threw that car all the way over onto another track when another train was coming in the other direction, and that hit her also. And that threw her like 25 yards off the track, and the car was so crumpled up, piece of metal, that they had to cut her out of that.
Mm-hmm.
She could not get out herself. And here she is sitting in front of me in the emergency room. The doctors called for a psych evaluation on her, and all she had was a black eye. That's it. A black eye. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. And she described what happened, and I asked her, well, what were you thinking when you came to and you were inside of the crumpled car and you weren't dead? She said, I was furious. She said, I was absolutely furious. I did not want to be here.
Yeah.
I intended to be dead. I didn't want to be here. And then she said she had this real mellow feeling just kind of came over her, like she was drunk or something. And a voice said, "Just calm down. Everything's going to be fine." She got cut out of there, and after I talked to her, I didn't think she was any longer suicidal. I thought, well, she learned her lesson. She's not going to do this again. So I just recommended she be released. I did not think psychiatry would approve that, but they did. They let her out. Another guy had a 357 Magnum, all cylinders loaded. Put it to his head, click. Put it to the ground, bang. Put it to his head, click. At the ground, bang. You go, okay, I got it. 2 bullets didn't go off.
Guardian angels protecting both. Yeah. Yeah.
Another guy, he had a 45 pistol, put it to his head, pulled the trigger, went click. He took that same round to the gun range the next day, put it in the gun, and fired it again, and it went off. Thing after thing after thing like that. Working in the emergency room, I got to see these things.
Yeah.
There was something that interfered with each one of those suicide attempts.
Again, we have that in the Quran. We have the example of, what is it? I think you brothers will be more familiar, Brother Muhammad or Igor. We have the verse where, I think, is it Sulaiman alayhi salam is presented the throne. No, sorry. What is it? Remind me. How does it go? Basically, there's an example of how a jinn was able to help transport something that we can't transport. They can do things basically that we can't do. Sorry, go ahead. Any of you? Yeah.
As the story goes, Dr. Jerry, the Prophet Suleiman, it said in the Quran that he was given the most powerful kingdom in history of humankind, and he had control over the jinn. And what happened was he wanted the throne of the Queen of Sheba to be brought to him, like in front of him physically. And he asked a question in his court, who can do it for me? And one of the most powerful jinn, and maybe this is a tribe or nation of jinn called Ifrit, proposed that I can bring it to you before you sit. Like he was standing before you sit on your seat, I can bring the throne to you. And then someone else in Sulaiman alayhi salam's court said, I can bring it to you before you blink, in the blink of an eye. And then he brought the throne in front of him. That's how the story goes. Brother Igor, if I missed something, you can say so.
No, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So this is an example.
So it just shows us again that because the Quran talks in detail actually about Ifrit, there's another type of jinn called Marid in the chapter of Quran called Surah Safat. And what the Quran says about these jinn is that they try to traverse the limitations placed on them and ascend to the first heaven, so they can eavesdrop on the news that's being transmitted between angels, and they then hijack this news and pass it to soothsayers or magicians, who then use this news for their astrology or magic. And when they try to do this, the angels basically fire shooting stars at them. So this type of shayateen is called marid. And the type that whispers to us and causes OCD, these are also given a name, and they're called qarin. So these are the jinn that I think you are familiar with, Dr. Jerry, the ones you've spoken to. These are called qarin.
And one other thing that you mentioned is that when they're told that they have light in them. So we're told that, amongst these entities, these jinn, there are believers as well as those who are following Satan. So there are both. It's not that all the entities are following Satan. I think, brothers, if you can correct me, there are those who are not following the way of Satan as well amongst them.
Just one thing pertaining to Brother Igor's question, and he asked, why do these parasitic jinn called qarin, how do they benefit if their host is being killed off? and this is just my personal opinion, I think that their main mission is to take the person to hellfire. And if the person has committed suicide, then they have succeeded in their mission, and they are maybe given a high reward from the higher ups. The more powerful jinn maybe give this lower ranked shaitan lots of rewards and honor. And I think this is a reward that they get if their host commits suicide.
And
This is
It wouldn't surprise me in the least if that were the truth.
And one more thing on the patterns that you have, Jerry. Now that he's mentioned that, the patterns, I think you updated your list of patterns as one of them being where they try to break up relationships, they try to break up marriages. And so this is also mentioned in the Quran that Satan actually says that you have done the greatest one. You know, he's, you know, I think there's a story. Is it hadith or is it in the Quran? I'm not sure.
It's I think it's hadith. That it says it actually goes into great detail that Satan, who is Iblis, has his throne on the water, and he established his throne on the water to mimic the Creator, because it says Allah, the one God, also placed his throne on the water, and every day Satan's soldiers go to him with reports as to how they're making humanity suffer. And Iblis reads all the reports, and then at the end of the day, he calls the one who has been successful, separating the man from his wife. And he says to that devil, you have done the greatest benefit. You have done the greatest work. I reward you. So in his mind, the greatest evil is to separate a man from his wife.
Yep.
And I personally have pondered over this. And when I see the alphabet agenda, what they're after is they're just breaking down the nuclear home. There is no more nuclear home in the West, and the divorce rates are at an all-time high, and this leads to societal disintegration. And you can see what kind of impact that would have if you separate a man from his wife, and when it becomes big in society, it leads to entire destruction of society. So that's what Satan loves the most.
I don't know how many psychotic patients I've talked to where the voices told them that their girlfriends were cheating on them. Or if I'm talking to a female who's hearing voices, they're telling her that her boyfriend or husband is cheating on them. You know, so they're constantly trying to create discord in the family, to break the family up. They hate children, they hate families.
And when they fail,
your mic might be dropping. If you could just lift your mic, it might be dropping, Jerry. Your mic.
Oh, my mic is out.
No. It's in, but the piece might be falling down. If you just want to bring, that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
When they fail separating the man from the wife, they go after the child and they make the child mess up its gender, giving them all these hormones when they're just 5 or 6 years old. Yeah. So when they fail with the parents, they go after the child. It's sinister.
Yeah, it's crazy. They go after the child anyway.
You know. Yeah. It's similar also in chapter 2 in the Quran, which is the longest one. There's a whole story about the time of Solomon, where there were devils that were basically inspiring mankind to blaspheme in the form of teaching people magic. And also, one of the things that they were teaching, which is a trial on mankind, is to separate a man from his wife. And
can you remember the verse? Can you remember the verse?
Yeah, it's chapter 2, verse 102. And basically, in the Quran, the spouse is the garment for the other spouse. Like, they are supposed to be connected in such a way that they are like each other's clothing. Which is an analogy of the power from that relationship, and I think that the separation of this form of these two spouses that really shows like how sinister and how devious this it's like a military force on a cosmic level, on a personal level. Yeah, that's the verse right there, actually. this is something that, you know, concerns us being children of Adam. We're the first, you know, ancestors, the first man and the first woman had exactly the same type of, you know, interaction at that level as a husband and a wife, with the very first, you know, given the designation devil that we know of.
Yep, absolutely. Exactly. So what happened with them at the beginning of time, Adam and his wife, that is the same thing that is the biggest achievement of Satan right now today, to break up the man and the woman. Yeah.
Yeah, and also to, you know, like Brother Muhammad was saying, you know, that they want to give nowadays hormones to young children that fundamentally alter their bodies, which are created by God. And this is actually mentioned very openly in the Quran, that Satan is the one that commands mankind to change the creation. Yes. So, you know, the idea is that they look at us with spite, the devils mainly, and basically whatever kind of biology they have on their level, that's kind of, you know, very different. And so it could just be that, you know, they want to manipulate our form as a sort of symbolic gesture, as exactly like people, you know, tag cattle and they change the, you know, they brand cattle and things like that. It's a similar idea. Yeah, that's the verse right there, that he will command mankind to, you know, like whether it's hormonally or through the food, through surgeries and things like that. This is such a prominent part of the modern world. Where do we get these ideas? How does this even come to someone's mind, that they're not satisfied with their appearance, the way they're created, that they have to alter for some either vain reason or some kind of a fear or belief, you know, so some kind of a misunderstanding of what they are naturally. You know, it's always against our gut instinct, against our what in Islam is called the fitra, the natural inclination,
natural disposition.
Yeah, that everybody understands God to be a reality, that they understand that there is one God in the creation, that we are fundamentally created, and everything is trying, from these demonic influences, is trying to pull us away from that. The blasphemy is probably the most you know, poignant part of this agenda. To cause them to blaspheme about the Creator is the root of almost all of the evils that derive from that. So it's
it starts off from when you're a kid. You know, the kids are happy. They're playing and they're joyful, and the further they move into a society that's already programmed and programming them, and one of the first things you're taught is you're bad. You know, you did this thing, you're bad. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You know, you need to do this. If you don't do this, you're bad. You know, it starts off from when we're children. You're born into a society that's already programmed and programs you in the same way.
Yeah.
And nowadays you have all these people who are called detransitioners, and they regret, you know, the people who are transgender, but they detransition, and they speak as if they have such deep regret, and they speak as if they have been tricked into making that leap, making that transition. And they don't know that what was the stupor that captured them to make that decision. And you can see how distraught these people are when they're talking about their journey.
You know, I've noticed that with schizophrenics too. It's almost like they put them into a hypnotic trance. There was one guy I was working with who the voices, he'd had it. He wanted to kill himself. The voices said, "Okay, good. This is what you need to do. You need to get your gun, get in your car, and drive until you run out of gas. And when you run out of gas, get out and shoot yourself." Okay? So he did just that. He ran out of gas. He walked out into the desert with his gun, and he was about to shoot himself, and he said this bird that he'd never seen before in his life landed in this tree near him and just started screaming at him, just screaming.
Wow.
And he said he took the gun and he fired a shot at the bird, and the blast of the gun going off kind of woke him up. And he looks at the gun and he goes like, "What was I going to do?"
Wow.
You know? And then you hear that with these psychotic killers too. They go out and they kill a bunch of people, they shoot a bunch of people, and then when they're put on medicine and they're calmed down, they go, "I don't remember doing it." You know,
Wow.
I didn't remember doing it, or the voices told me to do it. You know, the devil.
It's
made
like a
me
rubber
do it.
band.
Your story, Jerry, of what you've experienced in the last 40 years. So I just want to direct people to the book that you've written here that is available on Amazon. You co-authored it with Sherry Sweeney, is it? Sherry Sweeney. I couldn't help but feel that your story of the last 40 years mirrors the story that we've experienced over the last 4 years. You know, what you've experienced in terms of like how they get you to believe something else, which is different to the reality. Like, for example, making you believe in a ball with spikes, yeah, that you should fear. So then you can take a ball with spikes inside you. You know, it just mirrors everything. And yeah, I was just wondering.
Or making you believe you came from a monkey.
Yeah.
Or making you believe you live in, whatever.
So I was wondering, I mean, what was your experience when you released this book around the same time that all of this was kicking off? I mean, what was your experience like? You know, the timing seems to be pretty amazing that you were just releasing this book just as, you know, a lot of this nonsense that was taking place over the last 4 years began.
Well, what was interesting was, you know, at the time I was working in the prison, in the psychology department.
Yeah.
And we had some programs running that would help other prisons.
Yeah.
And Sherry, my co-author, she was a prison activist trying to get the prisons to reform themselves. And I was all for that from after what I was seeing. But I couldn't attack the prison I was in because they'd wiped me out.
Right.
But she was attacking the Alabama prison system.
Right.
So I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll help you. I'll let you know how these people think. And you know, she would kind of run stuff that she was thinking past me. And I'd go, well, no, don't do it that way. They're waiting for a head-on onslaught. They want a direct frontal attack. Don't give it to them. You know, stuff like that. And we worked together on prison reform for probably 10 years. When one day I was talking to her on the phone, and I was telling her about this one schizophrenic prisoner I was working with who was hearing voices, and I'm like, you know, this is really wild what this guy's telling me. And she goes, "Oh, I know all about that." I said, "How do you know about that?" She goes, "I heard voices when I was a young woman." She said, "They almost killed me." This is after working for 10 years with her.
Right.
She admitted it. So that's how much of a stigma there is to this mental illness stuff.
Yep.
People don't feel good about it, and they, you know, it's like, okay, if you have a mental illness, you're bad.
Yeah.
You know, you're bad, and they want you to feel bad.
Yep.
And they want you to take these drugs so you will feel better, or that you don't feel anything at all. You turn into a zombie. So she had actually heard the voices, and after we talked, you know, we had a lot of conversations, and both of us went, we got to let this out to the world. You know, we have to at least let them know. Now, I couldn't do that while I was working for the prison. I couldn't do that while I was working for anybody. You know, so I had to wait until I was retired to start working on this book.
Right.
You know, and then she was great. She, you know, I would run stuff past her, so she had her own personal experience with the voices, and I had experience with hundreds of people's voices. You know, so we kind of chipped in and wrote it together.
Right.
And she was the main editor. So without her, this book would have never happened, really, or it would have happened in a much poorer form than it is in now. Unless I found another editor, which I could have done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I read the reviews as well, And again, those are huge stories in and of themselves. That I mean, that one guy who spoke about his shattering childhood sex, slave abuse, and military experiences that you've got as someone who commented on a reader feedback. What was it? I was shocked at how much that this person had been through trauma, and yeah, I'd rather not go into detail here, but I mean, basically, people are clearly supporting your work, saying that it's changing their life. Even if it's towards the end of their life, they're coming to a realization that this is the way forward, this is the way to release everything, and this is the way to accept. The main thing is that I've taken away from all of this, and I've been speaking to another close brother of mine as well, who helps people for a living. So this is what it is, speaking to people who help others for a living. And he says one of the key things, I think two key things has always been acceptance and forgiveness. And this is something that I see with your work when I'm looking at this. I mean, we can speak about the negative side, but I just want to remind people that if you study Jerry's work, it is truly life changing. What the steps that you've laid out, these patterns that are there to recognize, and therefore how to do the opposite, basically. And yeah, one of the key, I mean, some of them, just to mention off the top of my head, is like that they hate love, they hate laughter, they hate beauty, they hate children. And once you recognize these things, I think you're right. You can recognize when this is actually coming from you or if it's coming from a negative source. And therefore, you can actually counteract that by laughing at it, as you've shared in your work with your co-author, Sherry Sweeney. That's a lie, by laughing and saying that's a lie. I find it, there's lots of help there for those who are listening and find that they need some kind of material either for themselves or for another loved one. I recommend that, you go to Jerry's website. I'll probably put some links and share some of the documents on the Telegram channel as well. But continuing on, if there's something on your mind or anyone else's mind that they want to bring up.
I just wanted to. Sorry, go ahead, Jay. I just wanted to there was a pattern.
One of the first patterns I noticed was negativity. These voices were always consistently, irremovably negative. Mm-hmm. They never said anything good. It was always bad stuff. You're ugly. You're stupid. You're crazy. Yeah. You're worthless. Nobody likes you. I mean, any negative thing that you can think of, they would tell these people. And what it does is it drives down their frequency to a lower frequency. And when they get them at that low frequency, then they can drain them. Mm-hmm. So if they did say anything positive, it would usually be to come around and get them from the back later.
Right.
They would use all kinds of stuff. They would say, I'm Christ, or I'm Mohammed, or I'm an angel, or any kind of lie. They were persistent, consistent liars. They would lie about everything. Right. You can't believe anything they said. You can't make any bargains with them. Right. They were consistently anti-religious. They didn't like Muslim. They didn't like Christianity. They didn't like any kind of religion. Mm. They absolutely hate the 23rd Psalm. They can't stand it.
Yep.
They foster and create negative emotions. They're parasites. They drain their victims. They get louder after sunset. They will not be ignored. So one thing I saw with psychiatry telling patients, just ignore them. They're just hallucinations. Don't pay any attention to them. You can't ignore them. They will not allow you. And every patient I talk to, when I ask them, what happens when you ignore them? They said they get louder. They get more persistent. They will not be ignored. You can't just blow them off.
What you resist persists. What you resist persists. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They foster isolation. They don't want you to have any friends. They don't want you to have any family. They foster self-destructive behavior. They demand attention. They're always working for increased control over the person. Yeah. They gaslight. They manipulate perception into the worst possible means of interpreting a situation. They have complete access to the schizophrenic's memory. They can pull up every rotten thing he ever did and start judging and blaming him for it. They demand that the schizophrenic do not tell anybody about their existence. And they will punish schizophrenics who talk about them. So that's just a handful.
Yeah.
Anybody can see these. Anybody who works with schizophrenics can go to my site at jerrymarzinsky.com, pull up articles, and they can see a listing of these patterns. And they're the same for all schizophrenics. So if they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations, as the psychiatric mafia insists.
Yeah. Well, it seems like the world was already traumatized pre-2020 when the first lockdown took place, but it's almost like everyone was all of a sudden face to face to deal with things that they had buried. And then it seems like a lot of people suffered with a lot of trauma there onwards in 2020, 2021, and especially those who took the jabs. Yeah.
Because of the isolation.
Yeah. So isolation was another one. That was massive. The isolation, which created a lot more trauma and demonic possession, I guess you could say.
If you look at these patterns, that's the same stuff that's coming over the mainstream media right now. It's the same stuff that happened during the COVID stuff. It's all those patterns are right there. Yeah. It's like the demon on a macroscopic scale.
Yeah.
Dr. Jerry, when you were mentioning the psalm, which psalm was that, brother?
The 23rd. They can't stand it.
Yeah, the 23rd psalm.
The Lord is my shepherd.
Right.
From our Islamic tradition, we also have an assortment of Quranic verses, which when recited, these verses are, let's say, prescribed for what we would call ruqya. And ruqya is basically the process of healing a person through Quranic frequencies from a demonic influence. And some observations when people are being treated with ruqya are that if the demon that is within them is quite strong, you will see something unusual. For example, if the ruqya is being performed on a frail old lady, all of a sudden you might see her like physically attack men, and she seems to be as strong as 5 men. Like, do you have any experience of physical assault?
Oh yeah, I've seen it in the prison a bunch of times. They become supernaturally strong. They become 5 times as strong as an average man when they're enraged. It's like they're given that energy. That superhuman energy. There's one incident that I remember that just blew all away. This happened in one of the higher custody prisons, where they had like three tiers of cell blocks, and the guards were wanting to move this one psychotic guy. He was a big, strong, crazy prisoner. Okay, and they came to his door. They said, "We're moving you. Stick your hands out and cuff up." And he said, "No, I'm not moving anywhere. I'm not going anywhere." So and they couldn't get him to cooperate. So instead of turning off his water and not feeding him until he did, it became a pissing contest. So they said, "You come out of there, or we're going to get the pepper spray, and we're going to douse you in pepper spray." And this prisoner said, "You go ahead, get your pepper spray. Have at it." So they did. They had like these quart cans of pepper spray, and they stuck it into his cell, and he wrapped a towel around his head, and they just doused the whole inside of that cell with pepper spray. I don't know if you guys have ever been around that stuff, but it's very nasty stuff. It burns, and it's really nasty. It's you wish you were dead when you get sprayed with that junk. And he took his towel off, and he started cussing at him and calling him all kinds of names, and insulting them. And he still refused to come out. So they said, "Okay." And by now, here you have all 3 tiers of prisoners watching the show down there. So now the guards couldn't back down. They were stuck in this conflict. They had to win this conflict. So they said, "You come out of there, we're going to get the stun gun." And 50,000 volts. It shot a little arrow that kind of went in, and then the electricity would go through this wire that came from the gun. And it would knock down the biggest prisoners with just one shot. It would just knock them down. This guy, he just stood there and he shook. when they shot him. So they got a second stun gun, and they had two of those in them, and one was discharging while the other one was charging. I think they did it like 11 times, and this guy just stood in his shell, just shaking, with the electricity, but he wouldn't go down. So the warden showed up and he said, "Stop this! They're going to get me for cruel and unusual punishment." So they put away their stun guns, and they said, they told him, "Now come on out of there, cuff up, or we're going to get the dogs." So they had trained attack dogs. So these were vicious. They were like trained wolves. The prisoners were terrified of them because they would just tear the person apart. They were like being attacked by a wolf. I mean, they were terrified of them. So the prisoner said, "Yeah, go get your doggy," and started cussing them and making fun of them again. So they went and got the attack dog, and they had it on a long rope, and they said, "Come on out, cuff up, or we're going to sick the dog on you." So he said, "Do what you need to do. Come on and get me yourself, you bunch of sissies." And he's sitting on the bed, and they opened up the cell wide enough for the dog to get in. The dog ran up to him, and he put his arm up, and the dog clamped onto his arm and bit all the way down to the bone. And he was gushing blood, and the dog tried to pull him back, and he just pulled the dog up with his arm, and he looked at the dog that was attached to him, and he said, "Sit." And the dog sat, but it didn't let go of his arm.
Wow.
And everybody outside of the cell was going, "What is going on in there?" And then he started petting the dog like, "Good puppy, good puppy." Well, the thing's still attached to his arm.
Wow.
He's petting the dog with the other arms. He's going, "Good puppy, good puppy." He's gushing blood all over the place. So then they pulled on the rope, and the dog wouldn't let go, and the dog pulled him out of the cell, and then they beat the crap out of him.
Wow.
The supernatural strength. I've seen that over and over and over again. I saw like a little, 125-pound inmate throw around two guards inside of a cell like they were popcorn. They become supernaturally strong. It's just not even conceivable of how strong they can become when they get furious. They get that energy from the dark side.
Right. Sorry, Brother Imran, you had a question. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. It was more of like a connecting pattern since we talked about the mace. The mace method was that in the mace method they say that these thoughts, when they come, you're supposed to call them out as the liars. And
no,
in
that's
Islam,
not the mace method.
No, that's not the mace. Yeah.
That came from Sherry Sweeney.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's how she handled her voices. She would just say, "That's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie," because 98% of what they say is a lie. So if you don't believe what they're saying, they can't get you. You have to believe the lies they're telling you.
Exactly.
And they're constantly filling your head with lies.
Yeah. Exactly. And we have the same type of prayer in Islam is when we say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, is that we take sides. We say we're on the side of God, and we're calling out Satan as the liar. So it's very specific with us. Like we're calling him out as he's a magician. We call him out on his trick, and that's it. His trick is done with because you call him out, and it's a very strong method that I've kind of like, every time I say it, I say it 3 times. So every time I say it after, I say it even louder, just to make it aware, or to let the devil know that I know how this goes.
Yeah.
Right. And I just wanted to there's a connecting pattern there.
Yeah. No. I appreciate that. But one thing I just want to add to that, Brother Imran. What we found, Jerry, is this. So we have, just like how you have in Christianity, we've got those who are doing exorcisms, trying to cast out demons. But what we found is that for many people, there's not lasting effects. Yeah. And that is because, it works temporarily. It has an effect, just like reciting that surah that you mentioned, Mankind, 114, Mankind. So that has an effect. But what we've been discussing or figuring out recently is that what Allah says in the Quran is it's about those who seek the knowledge, follow what it is truly said. It's not just about recital. Recital has its power, but it's those
Implementation.
yeah, as you said, basically following the positive spiritual path. So if you're on that path, if you're following what you're discovering to be the truth, yeah, then you will truly be set free. Ultimately, as we know, truth
Yeah.
sets us free.
Yeah, that's the only real answer.
Yeah, yeah,
Because it's all a thing with frequency.
yeah.
Schizophrenics are at a very low frequency. The mentally ill, the depressed are at a very low frequency.
Right.
And these entities operate at a very low frequency.
Yeah.
And they're draining these people half to death.
Yeah.
So if an exorcist gets rid of them, for the most part, what I've seen is if they don't get on a positive spiritual path and stay there, those things will come back 7 times as hard, just like in the Bible.
Mm.
I've actually seen that happen.
You're describing addictions. Yeah, I've seen this with family members. They're going like making trips all the way to South Africa to be set into rehab yet again after like 10 years, doing the same thing again and again. Despite being on the religious, spiritual path, they're still going back because of these addictions. And my suspicion is because they're not following the knowledge part. It's not just the positive spiritual path. It's like they're still following a person, but they're not thinking for themselves. They're still following a priest, or they're still following a routine, even though it's good, but they're not following the knowledge that is being given. So they're not like taking it in there.
Well, once a alcoholic or drug addict sobers up, those spirits don't go away. They're following them around.
Right.
They're whispering in their ear, yeah, you can take a drink, or well, you're all upset now. You can go get a shot of heroin. Go ahead. I mean, they're still there.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's so hard, because they followed them around, and they'll follow them around for years, trying to get them to use again, because that's their food source.
Yeah. Yeah.
They want to get high. They can't get high in a spiritual form, so they have to take over somebody's body to experience that high.
Right. So you've mentioned, if anyone has, before I go, if anyone's got anything, bring up.
I just wanted to ask Dr. Jerry, what are your thoughts on drugs? Like, for example, drugs such as heroin, cocaine, fentanyl. Now you have in the United States, fentanyl crisis. So why are people taking these drugs as a way to escape the voices in their head, or are the voices making them take these drugs?
Well, I think it's both, and also the materialism in Western society now. If people aren't turning toward God, they're turning toward material stuff. Oh, I need a car. I need a house. I need to go on vacation. I need it, turning away from spirit and turning into the illusion. I mean, everything around us right now in 200-300 years is going to be dust. This is just an illusion. We're operating in an illusion, and people that are sucked in by this illusion are turning away from spirituality. They're turning toward this illusion that they make real, and they forget about God. And that's kind of the Adam and Eve thing. They come down and they get enmeshed with rock concerts and it doesn't satisfy anything, so they turn to drugs because they find out that material stuff for the most part doesn't make them happy. You got all these people that win the lottery and all of a sudden they're millionaires. If you track how they fare later, they all become miserable. They usually lose all their money. It made them absolutely miserable. They weren't happy with all that money.
Right. You just mentioned rock. I remember you've got in some of your material talking about how you were describing how the brain is a radio receiver, and it's like someone comes all of a sudden, you're playing some nice music, and someone comes along and then changes the tune to some kind of acid rock, and then you come back, and then you're like, okay, who did that? And then you change it back to the good tune, and then you go away, and then you come back, and then someone's changed the tune again back to acid rock.
Yeah,
and
that's kind of how it is.
Yeah, I thought that's a very good example. And I also found it interesting that you had in your material that don't listen to rap music and listen to good music. a lot of what you've got in your material, I'm like, yeah, this is now getting to the real core of where a lot of our problems are. A lot of things that we justify as being okay, like even rap music, it makes sense to me. I think I know people will argue there's good rap, but yeah, I think playing something that is divine, something that you would imagine to come from the divine, beauty, something beautiful. And yeah, go on. If someone,
If I may just say so, Brother Oasis, you reminded me of that Japanese scientist who had this experiment whereby he played music in front of water,
yes,
and he observed the crystalline structure of the water in response to the music. And he found out that when I think his name was Masaru Emoto.
yes,
And in response to heavy metal music, the water was disturbed and the crystalline structure was disturbed. But in response to other types of more positive music, it took on something positive, something beautiful. And human beings we're made of water. Majority of our composition is water. So you can imagine on a macrocosmic level what kind of impact that would have. And this is coming from me, who used to listen to heavy metal only. Previously, I used to listen to
what
heavy
he
metal.
would do is he would freeze the crystals. So he would do that to the water, and he'd put maybe a cuss word on one jar, and then play rap music to another, and then he would freeze the crystals, and these crystals came about. So here's one here. It says, "You make me sick."
Yeah,
that's what it looks like.
Yeah,
here's evil. That's what it looks like. Polluted water. What it looks like.
People have done the experiments with the Quran. They've done the same experiment with the Quran, and they've found that it's got a beautiful structure to it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And look at the polluted water after prayer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Doesn't the crystalline structure of evil look like a black hole, as if it's sucking everything within it, sucking all the light?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another thing I want to ask you, Jerry, you've also got mentioned in your material about reducing caffeine and sugar if you're struggling. And I found that to be very interesting. And I can't help but think about this when it comes to coffee. And there is this theory out there. I'm not saying it's true, but it is very interesting that the whole world is hooked on coffee and aren't sleeping that well. And you mentioned that these voices, they don't want you to sleep. They want you to be weakened. So yeah, I just thought, what is your thoughts on caffeine and sugar in general, regarding these voices?
Well, sugar is poison. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's poison to the body.
Yeah.
And anything that hypes up somebody who's mentally ill, like somebody who's psychotic or schizophrenic, they shouldn't be taking any kind of stimulant, because it only makes them worse.
Right.
And kids, they start bouncing off the wall with sugars. It's not good to let them eat a lot of sugar. They get crazy.
Yeah. Okay. And if anyone else had anything, otherwise I think we're probably coming. Feels like we're coming to an end today's.
Yeah, Jerry, one of your interviews.
Oh, go ahead.
One of your interviews, I can't remember which one it was. You said that these entities, they don't like marijuana for some reason. I was wondering, did you have any insight on why? Maybe.
Well, it calms people down. They don't want you calmed down. They want you hopped up.
Yeah.
They don't want you relaxed.
Yeah.
But marijuana has its own entity, and I've heard somebody describe it as it's a green entity.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say that marijuana isn't innocent. It just means that you're not amped up. You're not hyped up. But otherwise, it's got its own problems. Yeah.
It's got its own problems.
Yeah.
Especially that green entity wants you to keep using it. And it does. It kind of whizzes you out, and you can't function very well with it.
Yeah.
But the entities don't like it because it calms you down. They don't want anything that really calms you down.
Right.
That's why they don't want the people using drugs,
Mm.
these psychiatric drugs. That's why they beat up psychiatrists at such a large rate. Schizophrenics assault psychiatrists more than any other doctor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because they don't want to take these drugs to calm them down.
Right.
Even those drugs are rotten for the person.
Right.
They want them amped up all the time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Before, I mean,
I think Dr. Jerry was about to say something, and then
what I wanted to do was ask you guys a question that I don't really understand. I don't know a lot about Muslim, but what's
Islam.
with this? We're both, you know, Christians and Muslims have the same God.
Oh, we can answer.
You know?
Yes, please.
Why are they always at each other's throats? Why is this the jihad stuff? And then the Christians are like, oh yeah, the Muslims are evil. What is going on? I don't understand it.
Thank you
for two people that have the same God, that worship the same God.
Yes,
what is going on?
Okay, so we're gonna be here for much longer. We're gonna be here for much.
Yeah, this is very interesting. It's just my 2 cents, and the other brothers will also give their opinion. I think both the Christian priestly tradition as well as the Islamic priestly tradition have their eschatological narrative, and the eschatological narrative is gearing us to a point in time where there will be enmity between the Christians and the Muslims, but before that they will be friends and they will fight the common enemy. So I think there is a subconscious need to view each other, to view the other as, you know, the other, as well as theological differences, I think. And Muslims,
that has to do with the Jinn. Do you think the Jinn are causing this?
Of course, I think the Jinn are behind this as well. But also the Muslims have become very out of touch with our original tradition, and a large subset of Muslims have become literalists. Like they take their scripture very literally, and they don't read between the lines. They don't use spiritual discernment with regards to the scripture. And I think in Christianity it's the same with the evangelicals. They really hate Muslims with a passion. It's like they're Christian but they're Zionists at the same time. I think there's a lot of that. Yeah.
Ultimately, we have a video on our channel, which was led by Brother Igor here, which would explain how they're gearing us to ultimately fight each other. Yeah, the powers that be. But when you look at what Brother Sadi Muhammad was mentioning about eschatology, but when you dig deep, you're gonna argue: has this actually come from God, or has this come from someone else? Where did this come from? So when we dig into our literature, we find that there's a lot of contradiction in what we're taught outside of the book itself. Yeah. So we have a core book that tells us what is ultimate guidance, but what we're taught as Muslims growing up is very contradictory to what is actually in the book itself. And we're taught. So I can give you another thing that we're taught from a young age. My experience is to put this book high up on a high shelf. Yeah. To place this book really high up and don't think about this book. Yeah. And don't try to understand it because this is what we're taught. Don't try
the
to
Quran, that is. So Muslims are suffering from the same epistemological faults as the Christians, whereby it's taught to us that
they actually can read their book. They're not discouraged from reading their book, and actually,
the Catholics did prevent us from reading the Bible for decades, for years, hundreds of years. You're not allowed to read the Bible yourself. They kept it away from us. Yeah.
For us, they've, again, just like how we see with the medical authorities right now, everything has been don't think, follow the authorities. Yeah, that's what we're taught. It's the same thing with the Muslim tradition. So what you're describing about this whole jihad does not exist in the Quran. Yeah, it does not exist. Jihad is that person who is striving in the way of God, the person who is striving in the way of the Creator. Yeah, there's no such thing as starting a war. In fact, there's another word for war. Yeah, which is harb in the Quran. So this way, those who stick to the actual words in the Quran are going to find a lot of truths, and they're going to find that they don't actually belong to what the masses are following. Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
so. This is where the test is. Are you truly going to follow? That's why I said, are you going to read? Are you going to think? Are you going to figure out the truth for yourself? Are you going to just going to trust the masses and follow them to fighting each other ultimately? Because they will. I think most of the masses will end up fighting with each other. But those who follow what is the truth will say, I'm not a part of this. Yeah, I don't believe in this. Yeah. So that's how it is, yeah, for us.
Yeah, it's glaringly apparent, especially in this day and age, that most of what the Quran teaches is actually ignored for books that have been transmitted orally outside of the Quran. And you have the same exact model in both Judaism as well as Christianity, where it takes you away from what's understood to be the Word of God and into some kind of another text which has somehow holds way more importance and sway over the words of God. So the idea is, like, in Judaism you have the concept of the Talmud, in Christianity you have the concept of the letters of Paul, and then in Islam today, which is supposed to be fundamentally one religion that stems from the patriarch called Abraham, or in Arabic Ibrahim, that is the religion that ties everything together as monotheism. And when you just look at the world today, one of the things that is a kind of a prescription in the Quran is to not divide the religion into sects. Yep. This is something that we all observe today, and we just inherit because we assume that, just like in the medical system or in the scientific establishment, we have our different priests and we have our different, experts. The same thing can be said for religious understandings. Of course, the conspiracy against mankind via these institutions is so profound and so intricate that they would not leave a stone unturned when it came to that as well. But the only difference is that I would suggest is the Quran itself is widely regarded by many people that are not even attest to be Muslims either, that it is preserved. Whereas, when you're talking about the Gospels and when you're talking about the Torah, these things have been admittedly from both Jews and Christians to have not been preserved in their original state due to, some contradictions and, differences according to different manuscripts and things like that. But pretty much all of the, Quran that we have today, every sect that differs in the other books, they will all agree that this is the verbatim speech of the Creator. And I think that's very powerful knowledge that, will only allow the forces of darkness to make that as minuscule and insignificant as possible, especially in our day and age. They produce all kinds of cosmological, medical and scientific understandings to try to refute what people have understood in this tradition to be at odds, with what we observe in the world, what we observe from Revelation. And, when you think about it, it's not really the fact that we have even like differences in religious understandings. It's mainly the fact that what are we following and what are we getting our inspiration and wisdom from, the knowledge. Because if you're to ask like the ordinary person, okay, are you a Muslim or Christian? What do you believe in? Most people, they don't actually have very much understanding from their central book, where all the understandings have come from. It's mainly like you grow up in this environment and you're just kind of, it's an identity. It's like a culture.
Culture.
Yeah, it's very much divorced from the central argument. There is one God. Yeah. He sent down countless messengers. He sent down the revelation for the messengers to convey. He has angels. There's a day of judgment where everything is resolved and all the contracts are settled.
Rectified.
So everything is very logical, the way that, the essence of what even other religions, like even Hinduism and Buddhism, there seems to be remnants of it all over the place. But in the Quran, we're told that mankind was one community and that they had one religion, and this is the religion that is from our natural inclination to believe there's one God, and that he created everything. And he created us to understand this fact. So what did mankind do? Out of jealousy, out of animosity, they divided this. And every sect since then has had some kind of covetous claim on the truth.
Yep.
That's what we observe today.
Division upon division, sect upon sect. And as you said, Jerry, why are we arguing? It's the same creator. Absolutely. It's the same creator.
It has to be, yeah.
And I'll just add one more thing. Actually, Islam is actually at war. And it's the same war that Jesus was the same time, or it's connected to when Jesus was pissed off, when he flipped the tables of the money turners, of the money changers. Right? So Islam is at war with the money lenders. That's actually who we're really fighting against. We're supposed to be fighting against, is the ones who are ripping us off through the financial system. And just to connect it back to what we were all talking about, there's actually only one enemy on mankind.
Yes.
This is what I don't understand why Muslims are not talking about this, and that's the devil. The devil is an open enemy upon all of mankind. And that's the real enemy. And that's the enemy that obviously Jerry is talking about with these voices. And the enemy is us.
Yeah.
And the destination where he wants us to lead is through hellfire, with us following the voices and performing the actions of those voices. And that's the trick, is that if you listen to these voices and you perform the actions, it's going to lead you into a very bad destination.
Yes.
And we understand from the Quran that it came to rectify the mistakes the previous people made. So the Quran doesn't profess any hatred towards Christianity or Christians. Rather, it only raises one point of rectification, in that Christianity was, even if someone researches the history of Christianity, they will see that Christianity was originally a Unitarian religion, and later it became a Trinitarian religion during the Council of Nicaea and Council of Constantinople. So the Quran is simply pointing out that taking Jesus, or Isa as we call him, as God was a mistake. He is not equal to God. He is a messenger of God. He's a prophet of God, and he came as a source of. He came to spread the message that there is only one God. Other than that, Islam doesn't have any enmity or hatred towards Christianity. Rather, it tells us to fight the common enemy. The only point of rectification is that Isa, or Jesus, is not God. He's not equal to God. He's a messenger. He's a prophet of God.
We're guilty of the same. They've done the same thing with Muhammad. They've done the same thing with Muhammad. The worship of Muhammad, the worship of Jesus. We're studying quite deeply cosmology, and we found these connections between sun worship, moon worship, Jesus worship, Muhammad worship. Ultimately, Jerry, I know you're one to recognize patterns and see things, repeating. And that's what it seems to be, that Satan continuously diverts us from remembering that he's the enemy, and we're given all kinds of other enemies, and at the same time divert us from remembering the creator and instead remember men instead of the creator. It's the same pattern that seems to be repeating from the very beginning of time. So that's what it is. Ultimately, you're right. It's the same creator. It is very simple. We're following a religion of OCD. I'm waking up to this myself over the last year, that a lot of the illnesses within my own family, myself, other members, it's following an OCD religion that does not exist. They're given lots of things to do that you must do, compelled. As Brother
It's just
said.
like the Pharisees and Sadducees during the time of Jesus. The priest class focuses on legalism. They focus on ritual. It's not just about ritual. It's about eternal fight against evil. That is what God's message has come down to make good triumph over evil. Evil is the main enemy of humankind.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And if someone was to go to the hadith, which is a secondary body of literature, even there you'll find that there is a hadith which in which the Prophet is saying, he's complaining to Allah on the day of judgment, and he's saying, my people have abandoned the Quran. So
That's in the Quran as well. That's in the Quran, yeah.
Even in the hadith, the Prophet is saying that my people have abandoned the Quran. So why is the Prophet saying this? If it wasn't a problem, why would the Prophet say this?
Because
So the main problem within Muslims is that they have completely neglected the Quran. And the main problem within Christians is that they have completely rejected the original message of God. Yeah.
Yeah, we see the same thing, you know, all of the messengers since really Ibrahim to Noah to Adam, all of the long lineage of people that were inspired by the Creator via angels, they follow the same message, one and the same, no difference. The only differences are the people they were sent to, the context of the time, perhaps the verses of the books that came down for them were different.
Context.
But the same exact message. And this is why, you know, God says in the Quran that there is no change in his way. It's consistent. Exactly like the truth, you would expect the truth to be the same way no matter what. And one of the most powerful verses I find in the Quran, out of many, that say that basically the falsehood is stacked against the truth, and the truth obliterates the falsehood. And it's essentially, it's always bound to be extinguished by the truth. That's the defining difference. This is one of the names of God in Islam, is the truth. So, you know, when you see that in certain chapters, like for instance, where it says, you know that the life of this world is but amusement and diversion and adornment and boasting to one another and competition and increase of wealth and children. He's talking about, we are forgetting in this life the hereafter. And the hereafter is the most important attainment anyone can possibly have, because that's where the forgiveness is, that's where the punishment is. So we have to be mindful of that, beyond all of the materialism, beyond all of the different, you know, delusions. Satan is regarded, one of his titles in the Quran is the deluder, the deceiver, that he makes you think you are doing something out of guidance, but in actuality, it's like a fake virtual world that he creates for your mind. And you think that you're guided, but it's actually, it's you're being led down the garden path to, you know, a torment, really. Because people have ascribed godhood, pretty much everyone at some point in their life, to something that was not the absolute, all-powerful, all-knowing creator. And this is something that these entities take advantage of, that mankind is forgetful, mankind is created weak, mankind has free will, and they can choose either whatever reality they want, even though there is only one objective reality of whatever is going on. So it's like, if you are being compelled by these entities to do things out of, you know, compulsions, well, the opposite is true for the reality, which is, we would call this the deen, which has many different translations, but basically it's like the order or this program of our reality. This is what people will call religion, that God has put no compulsion in this religion, in this you know, judgment or verdict, this you know, statement of how things are supposed to run. You know, that proves to me that whatever people call themselves, that's one thing, but in reality, our actions, our thoughts, our understanding about ourselves, that's going to be the most important evidence when it comes to this idea of a last day, or the day when all the debts are settled. Because, everybody has an idea you want to figure out in this life, before death approaches. Why am I here? What is this? What is the purpose of this? So, to me, it's like glaringly obvious. We're given all these reminders, all these signs that, everything is under God's control. And, this is just a test in a sense.
True.
Well, one more thing, Dr. Jerry, you were mentioning that human beings have become detached from their original purpose, and they are continually pursuing materialism. And Allah addresses this in the Quran multiple times, and He tells us, do you not see that the previous generations who have been completely destroyed because of their actions were much better than you? And He reminds us that the previous generations were better than us. They were more advanced than us. But due to the same mistakes that they have made, which is pursuing the delusion of this world, they were destroyed. And we are heading in the same direction, pursuing this world instead of eternal beauty that Allah has created for us. And just we're following the previous generations. And Allah repeatedly talks about that in the Quran. And He reminds us, do you not see, do you not ponder? In this earth, there are signs for you to see that there were people in previous epochs, they were much better than you and much stronger than you, yet they were destroyed. And yeah, this is a reminder for us.
Evidence of that is coming out all over the place now.
Absolutely,
generation, what Kopecki or whatever it is,
Gobekli Tepe.
Yeah. They were around at a time where the human race wasn't even supposed to exist. And then the Sphinx. The Sphinx has watermarks on it, which means that it's 10,000 years older than what they say it is. So
and
all that
they
evidence is coming out now.
They still couldn't figure out how the stones that were used to make the pyramids were carried. And now they're saying that maybe they had technology over sound, acoustic levitation. Maybe they used sound to carry the stones. So one can fathom how technologically advanced, like thousands and thousands of years ago, we might have been in comparison to now, where we are just all we're concerned about is just merging with machines, like in Terminator 2, what they showed, merging with the technology we're creating. But those people were involved in greater technology. Like it's unfathomable. Yep.
Well, I've seen it. I've been to the pyramids and I've been to Peru to see Machu Picchu, and some of those blocks were, the size of a house. I have no idea how they shaped them and built them or moved them, but you could tell that the blocks in Machu Picchu were melted. I mean, they were fluid at some point because the edges were all rounded. And you couldn't even get a razor blade in between those things,
Wow.
And the blocks in the pyramid, some of them were so huge that I don't think they have anything that can move them today.
Nope.
And Devil's Tower, maybe you're familiar with Devil's Tower if you've looked at
I've been there too, a long time ago.
Yeah. I want to be respectful of your time, Jerry, because we're very fortunate to have you today, and we'd like to have you back as well. So I don't want to put you off, keeping you on for too much longer. Before we do go, Brother Imran, if you wanted to share your piece as well, before we go. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry, Jerry, I just wanted to ask, have you ever made the connection between dementia and demons?
No.
Well, just the word sounds the same. And if you could just Google the define dementia, and you'll see how it's exactly what the Quran says, is that that Satan he makes you forget, especially important things. And dementia, I think it says in dementia that it keeps people in isolation.
Oh yeah.
They have, right? So all of these things, it's like they know that it's from the demon, and they just kind of insert the word there just so that it's like, subconsciously priming people. Yeah, so there you go. A general term for or the impairing ability to remember, to think, or make decisions that interfere with doing everyday activities.
Right.
So, yeah, a distraction.
It sounds like something that the demons would love.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I just wanted to say something about the light, because I know you mentioned light and how you observe that after sunset it gets worse, the voices, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so I was thinking, okay, what is happening in nature that does that? So, as the sun goes down, the voices get worse, but as soon as day breaks, right, it breaks all of that. So we have a chapter in the Quran, which is 113. It says, in the name of God, the Passionate, the Most Merciful, I seek refuge of the Lord of the daybreak. And then the second verse, from the evil which he created. So it's like the evil that he created, it gets broken by that first initial light that happens in nature.
We should be clear, because last time a viewer corrected us. It's not the evil that Allah created. I'm not sure. It's the evil from what he created. It's like Satan was obviously created by the creator.
By Allah.
He didn't create evil. Satan is evil, if that makes sense, or he does evil. It's not necessarily that Allah created evil.
He can have created evil as a test, right? Like, we have a test, so he has to create some type of
that's what I said. That's what I said. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. So anyway, so just getting back to light, like, so this is a phenomenon that's happening in nature. And Brother Awais, if you can go to Surah Al-Asr 103, it is very interesting because we have five. Generally Muslims know the prayers are just 5 times prayer during the day. So daybreak is kind of just before daybreak. There's the first prayer. Second prayer is when the sun is just past the zenith.
At zenith.
As the sun is now coming down to the next prayer, it says here in Wal Asr, and that prayer is called Asr. It says Wal Asr. So by that time in nature, when the sun is now declining, human beings are in loss. Now, why? Because now that time is coming where light is now being taken away from our atmosphere, and the only way for us to get salvation is for those who believe and who do good work and recommend the truth and remember that to recommend patience. So be patient till daybreak is when that light will emerge again. So I thought that was very interesting that the light in nature has a direct connection to these voices.
I think that do good work is it's critical, because you can have all the faith you want in the world, and if you don't do good work, if you don't do good stuff, what good is that faith?
Yes, absolutely.
And the other thing that's interesting is that the voices got strongest between 3 and 4 in the morning. Consistent. They would always attack the hardest between 3 and 4 in the morning.
That's their time is closing up. That's why probably their time of being able to be really effective is probably closing. It's a bit like the vampires that we see, the vampire stories. As their time is coming to an end, they have to quickly scram.
It's darkest before the dawn.
Just one question to Dr. Jerry. Have you noticed any correlation to moonlight and
yeah, I have. Working in the ER, doing psych crisis in the ER on a full moon, it was nuts. Wow. It was crazy. I mean, it was like every full moon you were just bracing yourself, and it was so bad that we had a superstition that nobody should mention it being a full moon. It was almost like if one of the staff said, "Oh, it's a full moon," it's like you're bringing it on. It got crazy in the ER on the full moon. I mean, it was just all these crazy people started pouring in. All kinds of weird stuff was happening. It was just unfathomable how busy it got on the full moon.
Yeah, I mean, the mainstream Muslims, they fast on 3 days, or 3 days around that time when the moon is at its fullest. So they fast for
seek protection.
Yeah, seek protection. And I find it interesting because, yeah, people do feel a bit more depressed around that time, or people feel
Yeah.
that, well, there's something happening at that time. Definitely, yeah.
Why do you think that is, Dr. Jerry? What do you think is happening? What kind of
I have no idea.
aggravation?
All
Yeah.
I know is it happens. I have no idea why it happens.
And within the patients, is it
Yeah.
like they become more aggressive or
Yeah,
more
they get
depressed or
more agitated. There's more acting out. There's more violence.
Hmm.
I have no idea
Yeah.
why that happens. You know,
It's like when you
I think
mentioned parasites.
Mm.
In
Like
fiction
when
you
you
have
find,
like werewolves, like when the full moon is there, they are like on the prowl. And vampires, werewolves, I think these are like analogies to actual demonic activities. I don't know. It seems interesting to me.
And they all go away when light comes out,
When the
when
when the
the
sunlight,
sun comes
yes.
out.
yeah,
So there's a
yeah,
direct link between light
Mm.
and good, right? I think
Yes,
that's
yes,
what it is.
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
I
think that
mean,
God is light.
yeah. I mean, Jerry
Actually,
describes.
there is a verse that says that God is the light of the heavens and earth,
Yeah.
Hmm.
yeah,
right? And not only that, in our belief that we believe that God breathed into Adam his soul. So if God is made of light, he's breathing in light to Adam, and now we
God is
have that light within us,
Yeah.
right?
the spirit.
And
Yeah,
the spirit is light. So, and then if you think about it, we're born in our mother's womb, which is all darkness, and we become that light. It's kind of like the stars in the sky, right? So
Mm.
it's all spiritual if you think about it. And
Yeah,
Mm.
this type of knowledge, honestly, like from my own personal belief, like it helps when you dealing with these voices, because we all have them. And it's just like, when you think about and ponder about how God created the stars and how we're born, it's like there's a connection, and it's like it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think these are the knowledge that really
Mm.
helps the human being cope with what's going on, right?
Yeah. Connecting
positive.
everything. Connecting everything
Connecting
in a
everything.
world where they've disconnected us. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly.
right. They don't want you to know about them. They don't want you to know that they exist.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure we could do another session maybe next time on just the concept of fear, because I know you mentioned about fear being one of the key, what is it? They need us in a fearful state, right? And that's what we've been experiencing through the media for the last 4 years. It's all
Right.
fear.
They feed on fear. They are fear.
They feed on fear. And you've got a whole all of these patterns. I mean, I could just go through them. You say one of them is negativity. So for us, we have to seek positivity. They're anti-religious. So therefore, we should be all about the creator. We should be speaking that spiritual path. They foster in creative, basically things that we can do, like promote love, promote acceptance, forgiveness, confidence, not fear, good energy. Promote good energy so they're not draining. We could go on with all of these patterns that you have. There's an antidote that a person could prepare themselves for. They get they get louder after sunset. So maybe hibernate. Maybe hibernate during that period. I don't know. The voice, you talk about them being like in a bullying fashion. So you face it and you call it out. You say, that's a lie. All of these things are there for those who want to study the patterns that you've got on your website. So maybe we could go through some of this another time. But for now.
Well, I could also bring on a fellow who he's working as a mechanical engineer right now. He's very successful. He's got a family. But when he was younger, he was actually in a state hospital. He was psychotic as a bedbug. The voices were attacking him, and he was arguing with them.
Right.
He said at one point this dark cloud just came out of the ceiling, and then inside of the cloud he could see this giant snake moving around.
Wow.
And then finally it came out and it faced him, and it had the head of a lion that with one eye blind and scars all over it. And, he didn't know what that was, but it scared him to death.
Brother Ego knows what that is. Brother Ego knows what that is. We were talking about that. That's the.
Then he found out that there was an actual entity like this that the Romans had 2,000 years ago, and he found a picture of a bracelet. They called it a Braxis. He had no idea what that was. and he saw it. So I could bring him on with you. I'm sure he'd love to talk to you guys.
That would be amazing, inshallah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, the main thing I found in studying the Quran is, especially over the last few years, is that we're either consuming something which is, I mean, the nature of fire is something that is consuming. Yeah, fire consumes everything. And whereas when we speak about paradise, when we speak about the Garden of Eden, it's something that is growing, something that is creating, something that is flourishing. And
Water.
this is what the Quran also promotes. It's about, are you, on the consuming path where you are being consumed and you are consuming, or are you on the creating path? Are you supporting those who are creating? So in that sense, I'd like to say thank you very much, Jerry, for being a creator, because you've created a path, for people to wake up and, basically heal themselves of the madness that is sold upon them. So yeah, thank you very much, Jerry, for today. And
You're welcome.
Yep.
Thanks for having me. It's guys like you that help get this out. I couldn't get it out without you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be just like a lost man screaming in the wilderness. Hey, look at this,
We'll look forward to speaking to you again and also interviewing that mechanical engineer that you talked about. That'll be really interesting.
I'll arrange it. I probably don't have any time until April, but we could set something up for April.
I say book us in straight away because we will definitely have something here.
Okay.
April is also well.
Who should I contact? Should
the same email? Yeah. The same email you contacted today.
Okay.
endgameislam55@gmail.com.
Okay. I'll do that. I'll get in touch with this fella and see if he'd be willing to speak with you guys.
Yeah. And okay. So so we'll send this link. How do you want this? So we'll send this.
Oh yeah, just send me a link when you have it.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. If there's anything else that anyone wants to mention, you mentioned Gerens, Sadi. Oh, Gerens. Oh, for Jerry. Yeah. Is that what you're saying, Sam?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that it was a real pleasure talking to you, Dr. Jerry, and the Quran is like a miraculous book. It has answers of everything. We just have to explore deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
And the Quran is a book that needs to be studied because it has answers for everything. That's what I believe.
Yeah. So you were mentioning Sam Gerens. Yeah. If you were interested, he recommends Sam Gerens. He's done some amazing work on the Quran, again, which is not going according to the mainstream.
Yeah, what I was saying is that if Dr. Jerry, if you would like to study the Quran, of course, studying the translation doesn't do the Quran justice because the Arabic has its own properties. It can open up like a new dimension altogether when you study the Quran from its Arabic. But also, none of us over here are experts in Quranic Arabic, so we try to navigate through English as well as through studying the root words. But there are some good Quran translations out there as well from people who have translated it to English. Maybe Sam Gerens is one of them, I think.
Well, what's the name of the book? How do you spell his name? Sam
Gerens, Gerrans. Yeah.
And what's the name of the book?
The Quran, a complete revelation.
Yes, that's the one.
The Quran, a complete revelation.
Yep, that's the one. Yep. He's got a great body of work. Yeah.
Okay, I got it down. Okay, I'll look it up.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you very much again, Jerry, and thank you everyone. Thank you guys.
You're more than welcome.
Yes, this has been brilliant. This has been very enjoyable, and I know that we can go on forever, but probably it's best if we stop here for today.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Until next time, everyone, keep well, and all the viewers as well, and see you on the next one, inshallah. Salams.
Take care.
Yeah, peace to all.
Peace.
Okay.
Bye-bye.